Chapter 1822. I heard she's Yu Yu's older sister. Shen Longhua looked at his wife and said, "They do look alike, but Qianqian's face is a little rounder." Yes, Mom seems to like her very much. She had a good chat with her in the room just now. When Shen Longhua heard that, he smiled and nodded his head. He looked at Yi Qianqian and Shun Julia, who were washing their hands in the kitchen. Mom rarely likes a young girl so much. It's not easy. Mrs. Shin looked at her husband with a smile and said softly, "Let's go wash our hands and eat." Shen Longhua smiled, stood up, and reached out to his wife. Mrs. Shin blushed slightly, but she still reached out and put her hand on her husband's palm. Yi Qianqian and Shun Julia quickly finished washing their hands and sat down. The more Nanny he looked at the girl, the more she liked her. She said, "Qianqian, these are all dishes from Annie He's hometown. They're all Annie's specialties. Try them." Yi Qianqian smiled. "Yes. Thank you, Auntie He. Nanny He, why don't you sit down and eat with us?" Shun Julia patted the stool next to him. Mother He looked flattered. She waved her hands and said, "No, no, no. Forget it. Old Madam won't be happy if she sees it." Shun Julia understood and didn't want to force her. When Yi Qianqian saw this, her understanding of the old lady became even more horrified. This old lady looked a little scary. When Yi Qianqian recalled what the old lady had said about her short life, she felt a little uncomfortable. Nanny He brought Yi Qianqian a bowl of rice. Feeling a little embarrassed, Yi Qianqian asked, "Grandma isn't back yet. Aren't you going to wait for her?" "No need. Let's eat first." Mrs. Shun waved her hand. "Your grandmother is always like this. She often goes out and doesn't see anyone. Sometimes she will eat at a friend's house. We don't have to worry about her." Yi Qianqian nodded, but in his heart, he couldn't help but think, what if the old lady came back when they were halfway through eating? Would she say that he didn't know the rules and didn't show filial respect to his elders? The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. When she saw that everyone in the family was used to it, she slowly began to eat. Because of Shun Julia's presence, Yi Qianqian didn't feel too restrained when she ate. All of a sudden, Yi Qianqian felt a warm sensation on her leg, and she shivered involuntarily. Her heart raced as she turned to look at Shun Julia. Shun Julia's expression was natural as he calmly ate his meal. Yi Qianqian pushed his hand away. At the same time, she felt someone looking at her. She looked up and saw that it was Madame Shun. Her face heated up, and she immediately lowered her head. The next moment, she felt another itch between her legs. She immediately clamped down, and her whole body went numb. She turned around and glared at Shun Julia. Who would have thought that Shun Julia's expression would be so calm and composed? Feeling her gaze, he turned around and smiled brightly. Yi Qianqian was at a loss for words. She glared at him fiercely. Mrs. Shin noticed and asked, "What's wrong?" Shun Julia smiled and said, "She loves me too much." Yi Qianqian glared at him and quickly lowered her head with a red face. She reached out and pinched Shun Julia's thigh hard. Shun Julia wailed. Mrs. Shin asked again, "What's wrong?" Shun Julia smiled brightly. "Mom, it's nothing. Let's eat." Chapter 1823. But she didn't expose him. She lowered her head and continued eating. Yi Qianqian felt that she was about to become a slut. In public, she actually, it was all Shun Julia's fault. Fortunately, Shun Julia's parents seemed to be easy to deal with. She was afraid that if Shun Julia's grandmother came back and saw it, would she lowered her head and blushed as she quietly finished her meal. Other than the few times when Shun Julia would reach out and touch her, everything else seemed quite harmonious. Fortunately, old Mrs. Shun still didn't come back after they finished eating. After Yi Qianqian finished eating, she was about to help Nanny He clear the dishes when Shun Julia pulled her away. Shun Julia's parents were looking at them ambiguously, which made Yi Qianqian feel even more guilty. Could it be that the old couple had seen all those small movements just now? Yi Qianqian's cheeks were burning as she was pulled away. She wanted to find a hole to hide in. Once they were out the door, Yi Qianqian retracted her hand and asked, "What were you doing just now?" "Huh? What do you mean what?" Shun Julia played dumb. He blinked his eyes and looked at Yi Qianqian with an aggrieved expression. Yi Qianqian's face was still warm. She hit his hand hard again and said, "Your mother and father are still here, and you're touching me all over. I keep feeling like your mother is watching me. I wasn't touching you all over. Don't accuse me wrongly," Shen Julia exclaimed with his arms crossed. "Besides, isn't that how you usually eat? I'm used to it." Shen Julia's words made Yi Qianqian feel even more ashamed. She roared, "You're shameless. You're not usually like that." "I am. You're just used to it and can't feel it. I'm not. Don't tell me you're always touching a girl's leg and suddenly forgot who you're doing it with." Yi Qianqian narrowed her eyes and looked at him suspiciously. Puffed, puffed. "How could that be? I only have you. You can't suspect me." Shen Julia held Yi Qianqian in his arms and quickly began to express his loyalty. Yi Qianqian looked at him and snorted, but she couldn't help but smile. Shen Julia saw the smile on her face, and his lips curled up. He leaned forward and kissed her. Yi Qianqian was shocked and instinctively looked to her left and right. After confirming that there was no one around, she pinched his waist again and said, "You're so annoying. We're on a main road. What if someone sees us? What's wrong with being seen? I'm kissing my own girlfriend, can't I?" He held Yi Qianqian's hand and pulled her into his arms. "No one usually comes here. Give me a kiss." Yi Qianqian's eyes lit up. "No." Yi Qianqian turned to leave. How could Shen Julia allow that? He pulled her over and held her in his arms. Then, he kissed her passionately. Shen Julia skillfully penetrated her and squeezed her tighter and tighter. Yi Qianqian struggled for a moment, but it was futile. She looked to her left, and, right to make sure no one was coming before, she closed her eyes. As she passively endured such a passionate kiss, Yi Qianqian felt an unprecedented sense of excitement. This was the first time he had acted so presumptuously on the main road. If someone saw this, it would definitely be very awkward. "Ayaya, isn't this our neighbor, little Shun Shun?" A teasing voice sounded like that of a woman. Yi Qianqian was shocked and instinctively pushed Shun Julia away. Chapter 1824. When he turned his head, he saw a woman in her 30s. She had a head of yellow curly hair and looked more mature. She looked at Shun Julia mockingly and said, "Oh my, it's really you. Can't you control yourself in public?" When Shun Julia saw that it was her, he rolled his eyes and said, "Hey, can you not interrupt me? Do you know how difficult it is to trick my wife into giving me a kiss?" The woman also had a look of disdain on her face. "Wife, are you married? Why didn't I know about it?" "Soon. I'll call you when I get married." Yi Qianqian tried her best to cover her face with her hair. Her face was so red that it looked like she had applied layers of blush. She was so embarrassed that she couldn't lift her head. It was one thing to be seen, but judging from Shun Julia's tone, they seemed to be very close. The woman looked at Yi Qianqian and said, "Oh, it's a beauty. Aren't you going to introduce her to me?" Shun Julia put his arm around Yi Qianqian and said, "This is my girlfriend, Yi Qianqian." When Yi Qianqian heard that, she had no choice but to look up and extend her hand to the woman. "Hello, hello, hello. I'm Zhuang Kaidai. I live next door." Zhuang Kaidai looked at Yi Qianqian and suddenly looked surprised. She said, "Why does your girlfriend look a little familiar? Have I seen her somewhere before?" "Of course. Do you remember Yi Yu? Oh, your ex-sister-in-law? Of course I remember." After saying that, Zhuang Kaidai looked as if she had suddenly realized something. She said, "I was wondering where I had seen her before. Are you Yi Yu's sister or sister? You look so similar. Even your names are similar." "Yes, we are twins, not identical. We are heterozygotes. That's why we don't look alike." "I see." Zhuang Kaidai smiled. "But you have good taste. Little Shun Shun has been obedient since he was young. He has never brought a girl home. You're the first one I've seen." When Shun Julia heard that, he looked at Yi Qianqian with an aggrieved expression and said, See? Even Sister Kaidai said so. I'm really a good boy. You can't doubt me in the future. I feel so wronged." Yi Qianqian glared at him. Faced with Zhuang Kaidai's suggestive gaze, she blushed and said, "I was just joking. I never suspected you." He held Yi Qianqian's arm and said, "That's right. I won't do anything to let you down. Isn't that right, Sister Kaidai?" I'm very loyal to you. That's right. Zhuang Kaidai rolled her eyes at him and said, forget it. All right, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. My child is still at home alone. Go home and feed the child. All right, goodbye, Sister Kaidai. Shinjiliet couldn't have asked for more. He quickly waved his hand and urged them on. Zhuang Kaidai was both annoyed and amused at the same time. She said, you little brat, well done. She strode forward. I'm leaving. Goodbye, Qianqian. Goodbye, Sister Kaidai. Zhuang Kaidai walked over and brushed past Yi Qianqian. In a low voice, she said, if you're going to marry this guy, be careful when dealing with his grandmother. She's a tough nut to crack. With that, she pulled away from Yi Qianqian and waved at them. Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat. She immediately nodded. I'm leaving. Zhuang Kaidai finally left. Chapter 1825. What should I do? What should I do? She didn't know what to do at all. Yi Qianqian was a little absent-minded. Shinjiliet quickly noticed. He looked at her and asked, what's wrong? Shinjiliet's eyes lit up like stars. They were so bright that it moved her. Yi Qianqian calmed down and shook her head. It's nothing. Why don't we go back? Shinjiliet nudged her with his shoulder. His eyes were filled with lust and excitement. They were tinged with an extremely ambiguous color. When Yi Qianqian saw the look in his eyes, she knew what he was up to. Yi Qianqian glared at him and turned to leave. No, it's a mess. Hey. What a mess. Watch what you say. Shinjiliet called out from behind. He strode to catch up with her and crouched down to look at her face. Then, as if he was surprised, he shouted, wow, why are you blushing? I mean, I've been working overtime all day. I'm very tired. Yi Qianqian took large strides and walked around him as she continued forward. Shinjiliet followed and shouted, where are you going? There's a small park in front of us. As soon as he said that, he seemed to realize something. He looked at her with disgust and shyness and said, you're so disgusting. How could you have such a perverted idea? Yi Qianqian couldn't hold it in anymore. She laughed and pushed him away forcefully. In a low voice, she said, get lost. No. It's not good to get lost like this. What if someone sees us? Shinjiliet didn't know what was good for him. He leaned over and pulled her. Let's go back. I'm sleepy. Yi Qianqian saw the dark circles under Shinjiliet's eyes. She pursed her lips and nodded. The villa was huge. Shinjiliet led Yi Qianqian around before they returned home. Shinlanhua was sitting on the sofa watching TV. Nanny he had already finished washing the dishes and was tidying up the house. When she saw them, she smiled and nodded at them. Hello, uncle. Hello, Nanny he. Yi Qianqian greeted politely and followed Shinjiliet in. Shinjiliet had already entered his room and turned on the lights as soon as he entered. Yi Qianqian had originally thought that Shinjiliet's room would be decorated in a similar way. But who would have thought that it would be so different? A classic man's room. The first thing he saw when he walked in was an archery target on the wall, a heavy metal samurai shield, a Japanese army knife, a Swiss army knife, and a gun. Yi Qianqian walked in and stared at the AK hanging on the wall. Her eyes widened and she asked, is this gun real? Shinjiliet glanced at it and chuckled. As he undressed, he said, of course it's fake. Yi Qianqian followed his voice and looked in the direction of his voice. She saw what he was doing and took a cautious step back. What are you trying to do? Shinjiliet turned his head and smirked. He strolled over and whispered, guess what I want to do? Yi Qianqian took a step back and clutched her chest. The elders are still outside. Don't you dare mess around. What could I possibly do? Shinjiliet leaned forward with a smile. He lowered his voice and said, at most, I'll just keep my voice down. No one will notice. Bah! Shinjiliet burst out laughing. You're full of perverted thoughts. I'm going to take a shower. Just sit here. Chapter 1826. Yi Qianqian was startled. She stepped back, but he had already wrapped his arms around her and started kissing her. MMM. Yi Qianqian struggled a little. Shinjiliet held her firmly in his arms and slammed her onto the bed in an instant. Yi Qianqian had just gotten a chance to speak, but before she could say a word, her mouth was sealed again. Shinjiliet's upper body was bare. He spread his legs apart and pressed her beneath him. Hot kisses flowed along her neck. Yi Qianqian looked up and gasped uncontrollably. She put her hand on his back and patted him gently. You? Mom and Dad are outside. That's not good. Shinjilia pressed his lips against her chin. He gently sucked on it and mumbled, they won't come in. Yi Qianqian rubbed his hair. Her breathing was a little uneven. She said, go take a shower. I don't despise you. As Shinjilia spoke, he had already unbuttoned her bra through her skirt. It doesn't matter how long you haven't washed it. I despise you. It's too late to despise me. You can't get rid of me. Shinjilia's voice was low and husky. He leaned into her ear, and his warm breath was on her neck. Yi Qianqian was so sensitive that her whole body trembled, but she felt like flying. Shinjilia couldn't wait to press her against him. His slightly rough hands stroked the insides of her clothes. Yi Qianqian felt his presence. Her cheeks turned red, and her heart raced. They were still in his house. If his family found out, would they think that she was very lewd? Shinjilia didn't seem to be aware of it. He unzipped the back of her dress and slowly removed it from her shoulders. Her snow-white skin was exposed, and it made one's blood boil. Knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. Shinjilia paused. Yi Qianqian's body stiffened. They looked at the door at the same time. Yi Qianqian was so nervous that her heart was about to jump out. Yi Qianqian pushed him away, got up, and straightened her clothes. Shinjilia shouted with displeasure. Who is it? Your grandmother. He roared. Yi Qianqian almost laughed out loud. Why does it sound like he's scolding me? When Shinjilia saw the expression on Yi Qianqian's face, he kissed her on the lips in displeasure. He slowly straightened his pants and walked toward the door. Yi Qianqian hid herself and fastened her skirt. Shinjilia had already opened the door. Old Mrs. Shun was standing in the doorway with a dark expression on her face. Shinjilia made up his mind and looked at the old lady. He raised his eyebrows slightly and asked, Grandma, what's wrong? What about the girl? He's inside. What's wrong? Shinjilia had a bad feeling about this. Yi Qianqian did the same. She strode forward. When old Mrs. Shun saw Yi Qianqian, she immediately went forward to hold her hand. Yi Qianqian was shocked by the suddenness of the situation. She exclaimed, Grandma, what's wrong? Shinjilia quickly pulled Yi Qianqian back and asked, Grandma, what are you doing? Let me see your hand again. Yi Qianqian's heart was filled with apprehension. She extended her palm. Male left, female right. Show me your right hand. Yi Qianqian's heart beat faster. She extended her right hand. Shinjilia frowned. He pulled Yi Qianqian's hand back unhappily and said, Grandma, how many times have I told you not to believe in such superstitious things? What have you heard this time? Chapter 1827. Old Mrs. Shun took Yi Qianqian's hand and looked at it. She frowned and said, I was right. This girl can't do it. Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat. She was embarrassed. Shinjilia's expression darkened as he said, Grandma, I'm the one getting married, not you. Previously, when you liked Lily, I listened to you and pursued her. But now I like Qianqian. Can you support me? Yi Qianqian's expression darkened. No, this girl will die young. You can't marry her. You'll die young too. Old Mrs. Shun stomped her feet in anger. Would I harm you? I'm doing this for your own good. Jilia, don't make me angry. If I say no, it means no. Grandma, you don't have the final say in this world, but I have the final say in this family. Old Mrs. Shun yelled. You can't be with her. Yi Qianqian's heart trembled. She forcefully pulled her hand back. She was so embarrassed that she couldn't even force a smile. She took a step back and said, Old Shun, don't argue with the old lady. I'll leave. Shinjilia's expression darkened. He pulled Yi Qianqian over and yelled, No. Yi Qianqian was shocked. Her heart was pounding. Shen Longyue, his wife, and Nanny, he were all watching. Yi Qianqian's eyes were burning. She struggled and said, I know. Shinjilia's voice was softer than before, but it was still firm. Grandma, you should stop doing such superstitious things. Do you know how many people you've harmed because of your superstition? I've harmed people. Old Mrs. Shun's eyes widened in disbelief. When have I harmed anyone? Shinjilia, are you still my grandson? It's precisely because I'm your grandson that I'm reminding you. Think about Sister Manting, my brother, and Yi Yu. Which one of them didn't suffer because of you? Think about it. If you hadn't been so alarmist, will my brother and Yi Yu have gotten a divorce? If you hadn't been superstitious and believed that Sister Manting would bring good luck to our family, would Sister Manting have become what she is now? Think about it. Which of these superstitious things you've said are true? Old Mrs. Shin couldn't believe it. Are you doubting me? Yes, Grandma. I really don't believe in these things. This is the era of science. I can explain to you what you're thinking with medical science. Old Mrs. Shun stomped her foot in anger. You little rascal. I didn't make you a doctor to deal with your grandmother. No matter what, I'm a doctor now, and I believe in science. Qian is my woman, and I will be responsible for her. Today, I brought her home just to tell you that I'm going to get married. I'm going to have a wife. This is just a notice, not an application. Whether you agree or not, I'm going to marry this woman. Shinjilia's tone was very firm. He stared at his grandmother without the slightest hint of wavering. Yi Qian hadn't expected Shinjilia, who usually seemed so frivolous, to say something like that at a critical moment. His heart felt warm, but at the same time, he felt a little uncomfortable. His heart felt like it was being grabbed by a hand, and he felt so suffocated that he felt like he was suffocating. She thought that the most difficult part was over, and that she would be able to enter the marriage hall without any hindrance like an ordinary person. Chapter 1828. I'm doing this for your own good. Why do you have to be so stubborn? Old Mrs. Shun gritted her teeth. I've already told you that this girl has a short life. I'll go to an old friend. She won't live past 28. That's impossible. Shun Jilie's face darkened. Grandma, you have to be so alarmist. Be careful that I don't fall out with you. Old Mrs. Shun looked at Shun Jilie and trembled with anger. She shouted, You? How can you treat your grandma like this? I'm telling the truth, Grandma. You have to accept reality. Besides, it's impossible for me and Qian to separate now. Shun Jilie held Yi Qian in his arms and looked around. He enunciated each word clearly. Qian is pregnant. I can't wait any longer. I want to get married as soon as possible. Yi Qian was instantly stunned. She turned to look at Shun Jilie and reached out to touch her belly. Pregnant? When did she get pregnant? Why didn't she know? Shun Jilie seemed to feel her gaze. He lowered his head and looked at her gently. He said, I'm sorry. I couldn't help it, but I really had no choice. Grandma is very stubborn. If I don't tell her the truth, I'm afraid she'll force us to break up. Yi Qian blinked. She didn't react. Everyone looked at them in disbelief. At the same time, their eyes shifted to Yi Qian's belly. Yi Qian felt goosebumps all over her body. She laughed dryly and said, Why can't you stand it? Now, if people know that I'm pregnant before marriage, it won't be good. It's okay. I have to marry you before your belly grows up. Shun Jilie looked at Yi Qian gently and said softly, I can't let you and the child down. Yi Qian couldn't stand it anymore. Under everyone's gaze, her face became redder and redder. She lowered her head and tugged at Shun Jilie's clothes without saying another word. Mrs. Shun was also in disbelief. She said, Oh my God, Jilie, I thought you knew what to do. Why did you wait until now to bring it back for us to see? Shun Longyue was also dissatisfied. He frowned and said, You only brought it back now? Those who don't know better will think that the Shun family is a gangster family. Old Mrs. Shun stomped her foot, pointed at Yi Qian, and said, This girl's palmistry and physiognomy show that she can't have children. How can she be pregnant? Jilie, don't lie to me. Yi Qian's heart skipped a beat. Her hair stood on end, and she felt guilty. She wasn't pregnant. She couldn't be clearer about it. But this old lady could tell at a glance, and even concluded that she couldn't have children. Was it really possible that she wouldn't live past 28? Pooh. Impossible. Impossible. She was in good health. How could she not live past the age of 28? But if it was true, she was 26 years old this year, and there were only 2 years left before she turned 28. Then Shun Jilie's eyes turned cold. He held Yi Qian in his arms and said coldly, Nanny, you've made a mistake. Old Mrs. Shun was infuriated and bellowed. Shun Julia! Shun Julia held Yi Qianqi in his arms as he stepped back and said, "We're going to bed. The fetus needs to rest. Good night, Mom, Dad." Old Mrs. Shun was even angrier. Shun Julia had actually said good night to his parents, but not to her. She was obviously telling the truth. It was impossible that she was pregnant. This girl couldn't get pregnant. She knew Shun Julia's temperament all too well. If he really married the girl, when the time came, he would probably be alone for the rest of his life. Chapter 1829. However, Shun Julia was a stubborn man. How was she going to convince him? Old Mrs. Shun was so worried that her freshly dyed black hair was about to turn white. She stared at her grandson's room door and stomped her feet in anger. When Shun Longwest saw old Mrs. Shun's reaction, he stepped forward and said, "Mom, the children and grandchildren have their own happiness. As elders, we shouldn't interfere too much. I'm doing this for his own good. Why have I ever harmed my own family?" Old Mrs. Shun yelled anxiously. Shun Longwei didn't say anything. He pulled her and said, all right, let's go to sleep. The children are going to sleep too. But go." Old Mrs. Shun was at a loss for words. She turned her head back to look at Shun Julia's room 3 times with every step she took. In the end, she walked back into the room. Shun Longwei walked back to the sofa. Mrs. Shun and Nanny, he were already sitting on the sofa. Seeing Shun Long come over, Madame Shun said, "I don't think this child will be short-lived. Although I don't understand these things, this girl looks like she has good fortune. Her life isn't short either. How could she be short-lived?" Hearing that, Nanny he chimed in and said, "I think so too. This girl is very sensible. Besides, didn't old Madam say that she can't have children? Isn't she pregnant now?" Shun Longwei took a sip of tea and snorted. "Do you really think it's true? I'm afraid it's just something that Julia made up." In fact, Mrs. Shun was also suspicious. Hearing her husband's words, she was even more certain. She asked, "Why didn't you say anything just now? The son will make his own decisions. As his elders, we just need to support him." Shun Longwei put down the teacup. "It's rare for our son to like this girl so much. I also think that she's not bad. If we listen to our mother, I'm afraid it won't be appropriate." "That's right. Didn't you say that young miss would be blessed?" In the end, young master, Nanny he immediately realized that something was amiss and stopped. But after thinking about it, she continued, "Now she's living alone outside with a pregnant belly. It's not easy. Is this considered blessed? Young miss has suffered all her life and thought that she would be able to enjoy a good life once she came to our home. In the end, isn't this the end?" Shun Longwei lit a cigar and frowned, but he didn't say anything. Mrs. Shun sighed and said, "Perhaps Manting's good fortune hasn't arrived yet. She's already 30 years old. Half of her life has passed. If she doesn't enjoy life now, her whole life will have passed." Nanny he spoke bluntly. The scene was silent. After Shun Julia pulled Yi Qianqian into the room, he locked the door. Because of the drama, the atmosphere in the room was completely gone, and the mood was gone. Yi Qianqian clutched her stomach and asked, "When did I get pregnant?" "You'll be pregnant from now on." Shun Julia sat on the bed and said, "If you don't have one now, let's make one. As long as you're still willing to marry me and marry me, let's hurry up and get our marriage certificate tomorrow. Tomorrow is Sunday. Then I'll go again on Monday. I'm going back to Kingstown. I've already bought the plane tickets. Yes, let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau and take a day off." Shun Julia stood up and wrapped his arms around her waist. He gently kissed her on the lips. "I'm sorry for making you feel aggrieved just now. I didn't know that Grandma would suddenly say something like that." Yi Qianqian smiled bitterly. "I was still mentally prepared. Yi was tortured so badly by your grandmother, so there's no reason that everything would be smooth sailing for me. Now that I've finally confirmed it, it's not going to be smooth sailing." Chapter 1830. When Shun Julia heard that, he poked her on the head and rebuked, "It's not up to Grandma to decide whether things will go smoothly or not. If you want to marry me, we'll be together. What if Grandma doesn't agree? It doesn't matter. She'll agree." Yi Qianqian felt that something was wrong. She frowned and thought for a moment before saying, "I think what Grandma said might be true." Didn't she say before that Yu was fated to get married again? Now that Yu has gotten married again, what if Yi Qianqian really died and didn't live past the age of 28? Impossible. Grandma is just spouting nonsense. Grandma claims to be a demigod, so half of what she says is true, and the other half isn't. Based on what Yu said earlier, I'm guessing that Grandma has the intention of urging them to divorce. She's just trying to prove that what she said is true. Yi Qianqian was stunned. Shen Juliet continued. Grandma has rarely been questioned in her life, especially when she has set her mind on something. She won't change her mind easily. Grandma is a little paranoid. Is that an illness? Yes, it's a psychological illness. It's not serious, but it's difficult to treat. Moreover, Grandma is very uncooperative. Shen Juliet gently stroked Yi Qianqian's head and softly said, Grandma is used to being domineering, but I won't let Grandma affect us. Okay. Yi Qianqian still felt that it was inappropriate. She looked around the room and said, Why don't I go back first? I don't think it's appropriate. I've never had a boyfriend, and I've never met my boyfriend's parents. But is it appropriate for us to stay together? Let's sleep in separate rooms. It's okay. My parents are very democratic. No, I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think other people would stay with their boyfriends the first time they meet their parents. When Shen Julia saw Yi Qianqian's insistence, he thought for a moment and said, All right then, I'll go to a hotel with you. Huh? You're going too? Yes. Why don't you sleep next to me? I have an empty room next to mine. Sister Manting used to live there, but it's empty now. That isn't appropriate. Yi Qianqian blinked and felt even more uncomfortable. Then we'll go to a hotel. But do you think my parents will think we eloped? Yi Qianqian was speechless. After thinking about it, he finally decided to stay in Shen Manting's room. After informing his parents, Shen Juliet took the key and opened the door for Yi Qianqian. He took a clean bed and laid it on the bed. After tidying up the room a little, he allowed Yi Qianqian to move in. The room was very clean, even though it had not been occupied for a long time and had no smell. On the bedside table was a photo of Shen Manting. She looked particularly beautiful and alluring. She was sitting in front of the piano and smiling elegantly. Shen Manting was indeed very pretty. No wonder Shen Luo and couldn't control himself. However, it was such a fate. Yi Qianqian thought of Shen Manting. She looked at Shen Juliet and asked, I heard that Shen Manting was an orphan brought back by grandmother. She was already a big girl when she was brought back. Why did grandmother suddenly want to bring a girl back to be her granddaughter? Shen Juliet was surprised. I didn't expect you to be interested in this. Sitting by Yi Qianqian's bedside, Shen Jishue said, It's all because of superstitions. They say that Sister Manting is blessed with good fortune and that her horoscope is very similar to my older sister's. The Great Lock of the Soul officially changed its name to Restricted Hidden Marriage, pampering your sweet wife 99 times. Chapter 1831. Horoscope. Yes, horoscope. Shen Julia looked at the photo on the bedside table and said, Grandma is very strange sometimes. Sometimes she looks at people's faces and palms, but Sister Manting looks at horoscope. How did Grandma get her horoscope? Grandma went to the orphanage to look for it. Shen Julia glanced at Yi Qianqian with a strange expression on his face. He said, Grandmother always believed that her granddaughter was still alive. She said that if her granddaughter could come back, she would have no regrets in her life. She searched for her for more than 20 years. If she's still alive, she'd be about 28 or 29 years old now. So Grandma went to the orphanage to look for an orphan of that age? Yes, but because of this horoscope, she found Sister Manting. Based on her horoscope? Yes, she found her. After she brought her back to the capital, she did a paternity test and found that she wasn't our child. Yi Qianqian was speechless. But Shen Manting is already an adult. Why did she come back with Grandma? Yi Qianqian had automatically changed from your grandmother to Grandma. No matter how you looked at it, it seemed like a curse. She was still in school at that time, and an orphan's tuition had to be sponsored. Sister Manting's expenses were relatively high. When she first came back, she was dressed well, but she was too skinny. Later on, she became even more beautiful. So, She was seduced because she had ulterior motives. Maybe she wanted a better life, so she left with Grandma. Or maybe she just wanted a family. Shun Julia held Yi Qianqian's hand and said with sympathy and regret, she was too lonely living. Achoo! It was a scorching hot day, but Shin Manting sneezed. It was late, but the stack of papers was still unmarked. Shin Manting's eyelids were fighting to stay open. She yawned and suddenly felt the little guy kick her in the stomach. Shin Manting's yawn was interrupted, but her lips were filled with a happy smile. Shin Manting gently stroked her belly. Her heart was warm. Fortunately, the baby was with her now. Finally, it was 11:30 p.m. Shun Manting tidied up the papers and put them away before walking into her small bathroom. Ever since old Mrs. Shun's last visit, Shun Manting had gritted her teeth and changed her residence. From the easternmost side of the village to the westernmost side, he even specifically told the villagers that if anyone came to look for him, they must tell them that he had moved away. The people who lived there were all uncles and aunties. Shin Manting had a close relationship with them, so they were very willing to help her with this small favor. Although the monthly rent was 100 yuan, the small house was bigger and closer to the town, so she could earn some extra money from the summer cram school. Speaking of which, it was a blessing in disguise. After taking a shower, Shin Manting felt extremely sleepy. Shin Manting's 5-month-old belly was not obvious on her tall and strong body. It was just that his waist was a little sore sometimes, but other than that, it was not a big problem. Fortunately, the baby was very obedient and only vomited a few times. Chapter 1832. It was a 15-minute drive from the town to the village. It was not far, but it was not close either. Shin Manting paid the fare, and someone immediately offered her a seat. After thanking the driver, Shin Manting arrived at her destination without a hitch. The scenery along the road was beautiful, and the morning air in the countryside was refreshing. When she arrived at the town, Shin Manting got out of the car and went to the summer cram school with her test paper. However, she didn't expect to see a familiar figure at the door before she entered the school. A tall man was leaning against the stone pillar at the door of the cram school with a cigarette between his fingers. The smoke was rising, and it was hard to see his face clearly under the glaring sun. When he saw Shun Manting coming over, the man straightened up, put out the cigarette, and walked over slowly. Shin Manting felt as if her heart was hit hard by something, and she almost suffocated. She stepped back, and almost at the same time, Shin Manting wanted to escape. Shin Luo An's eyes darkened, and he shouted in a low voice, "Shin Manting." However, when Shin Manting heard his voice, she quickened her steps. Shin Luo and rushed forward and reached Shin Manting in a few steps. He grabbed Shin Manting's arm. "Ah!" Shin Manting screamed and struggled frantically. Shin Luo and held her down with both hands and whispered, "That's enough. Calm down." Shin Manting couldn't stand it anymore. Her heart was pounding like a hammer, and she shouted, "Let me go! Who are you?" The cram school was located in the bustling area of the town, and there were many people coming and going. When they heard the shout, many people looked over. Someone recognized Shin Manting and immediately came over and shouted, "What are you doing? Let go! Everyone catch him!" Shin Luo An's face darkened when he heard that, and he shouted, "I'm her husband, and I'm here to take her home." "I'm not. He's not." Shin Manting shouted loudly, "I don't know him at all. Let me go." Shin Manting's words made the people around more vigilant. They all came over and said, "What are you doing? Are you trying to abduct a woman? I've seen this kind of scam many times. You can't fool me." A rough man came up and threatened. Shin Luo and was a weak doctor who spent most of his time in the operating room and laboratory. How could he deal with such a situation? When Shin Manting saw more and more people around, she felt relieved. She looked at Shin Luo and shouted angrily, "Let me go, or you'll be in serious trouble. Manting, let's talk." Compared to Shin Manting, Shin Luo was much calmer. The child can't live without a father. "Let's talk first. Whether you want to go back with me or not is up to you. Tell them to go away first." This kind of formation was indeed a little terrifying. Shin Manting looked around at the many men who had gathered around and were ready to make a move. She knew that this was no joke. Pursing her lips, she nodded and said, "I'm sorry, big brothers. He is the father of my child." But he was not her husband, much less her lover. When the surrounding people heard this, they were also suspicious. They said, "Big sister, don't be afraid of him. We're all trained. Just shout, and we'll help you take care of him." "No need, no need. I'm serious. Thank you, brother." Upon hearing Shenmanting's words, the men walked away. Shenluo and looked at Shenmanting with cold eyes. He glanced at her belly and said, "You've grown up. You're pregnant with my child, yet you don't want to live a good life. What are you doing in this shabby place?" Chapter 1833. When Shenmanting heard this, she stared at Shenluo and sneered. "How do you know this child is yours?" Shenluo, and you think too highly of yourself, don't you? "Not mine." Shenluo, and took a step forward, and his eyes were very gloomy. "Then whose is it? It's none of your business. Anyway, it's not yours." Shenmanting's eyes were very cold. She looked at the man in front of her and felt only sarcasm in her heart. "What? After coming out of prison, you finally want to be a human being? Wasn't I a human being before? You have always been a beast." Shenmanting's tone was harsh, and she sneered coldly. Shenluo was not annoyed. He looked at her calmly and asked, "If I am a beast, then what is it that is being pressed by a beast?" Shenmanting gritted her teeth and subconsciously stroked her belly. She whispered angrily, "Don't talk nonsense with me. What do you want? Take my child home." Shenluo put his hands in his pockets and looked at Shenmanting. "Anyway, this child will be my first child. I don't want him to live outside without a name. I said this is not your child." Shenmanting looked at Shenluo and with a sarcastic smile. "Do you think I will keep a child for you? You are too naive, Shenluo." He gritted his teeth and sneered. "You can't change anything even if you talk big. Come back with me. I'll give you a good life. It'll be better than before. You can have whatever you want." Shenluo knew that Shenmanting was speaking out of anger, but he couldn't help getting angry. "No need." Shenmanting looked at Shenluo, and as if she was looking at a fool. "Why do you think I will go back with you? To tell you the truth, every time after sex, I will take the morning after pill, so it can't be your child." Shenluo tightly pursed his lips and stared at Shenmanting, trying to see a little guilt on her face. But Shenmanting's expression at the moment was full of sarcasm, as if she was laughing at him for overestimating himself and laughing at his wishful thinking. Shenluo's anger surged. He gritted his teeth and growled, "You're courting death. That's strange. If it's not your child, then it's seeking death?" The sarcastic smile on Shenmanting's face became even more radiant. She said, "I shouldn't have anything to do with you in the first place, brother." He stared at Shenmanting's bare face. Even though she didn't have any makeup on, her facial features were still very delicate. His complexion did not look too good, and his lips were a little pale. However, it was this face that made Shenluo's heart clench in pain. Shenmanting wasn't supposed to be like this. She was like a canary in his cage. Every day, she was bright and beautiful. Every move she made had an infinitely enchanting elegance. Now, in this small place, she had become a pregnant woman in the countryside. It shouldn't have happened. But what he shouldn't have done the most was that she had called him brother. "Brother?" Shenluo put his hands in his pockets and took a step forward. "Have you ever seen a brother and sister in bed? I hadn't seen it before I met you. After I met you, I realized that there are more than just people in the world who walk on their feet," Shenmanting sneered. "It turns out that there are also some beasts in human clothing." Chapter 1834. "Do you think you can finish scolding me?" Shenmanting curled her lips and was about to enter the cram school. "I can't finish scolding you. This child has nothing to do with you. If you don't have anything else to say, you should go back. I think our relationship is a little awkward now. It's better not to see each other, lest my husband sees us and causes unnecessary misunderstandings." "You have a husband?" Shenluo frowned and asked sharply, "When did this happen? Do I need to report to you when I have a husband?" Shenmanting's face turned cold. Who do you think you are? Shenluo and suppressed his anger and said calmly, Forget it. I'm not here to quarrel with you today. If you have something to do, you go ahead. I'll wait for you here. Don't wait for me. I also have a serious job. I have to work here until night. You're a pregnant woman. You have to work until night? Can a pregnant woman work until night? Shen Manting's expression didn't look good. She turned around and left. Working a cram school was actually very easy. The students who came to the cram school were from relatively well-off families in the town or children who didn't have good grades. They were usually between the ages of 8 to 15, and the boys were more mischievous. Therefore, Shen Manting only graded homework in the office, helped with the grading of test papers, and occasionally took over when the teacher took a break. However, Shen Manting was a little absent-minded at work today. The thought that Shen Luo might be waiting for her outside made her feel uncomfortable. She was nervous and afraid. Shen Luo was a person that she had to guard against. Shen Manting subconsciously stroked her belly. Her heart was beating very fast. What should we do? Baby, your father is coming to take us back. Yi Qianqian rested in Shen Manting's room for the night and woke up early the next day. She looked at the time. It was only 7 o'clock. She looked around the room. It was very simple. The cabinet at the bedside was locked. There must be something important in it. Yi Qianqian was always curious about Shen Manting. This woman had a lot of stories and was very courageous. She chose to escape after knowing that she was pregnant. She went all the way to a small village in Jiangnan. When Shen Zhilie told her about it the night before, Yi Qianqian was shocked. If it had been him, he might have just aborted the child or simply made a compromise and stayed in this place. After all, the Shen family seemed to treat her quite well. It was only after these thoughts flashed through her mind that she suddenly remembered that there was still Shen Luo. Forget it. I'll take back what I just said. She got up and found a new set of toiletries in the bathroom of the suite. After cleaning herself up, she changed into a clean set of clothes and walked out. Outside, Shen Longyue and Mrs. Shen were already sitting at the dining table. Shen Longyue was reading the newspaper, while Mrs. Shen was carefully spreading jam on the bread. Hello, Uncle Andy. When Mrs. Shen saw Yi Qianqian walking out of Shen Manting's room, she was a little surprised and asked, Zhilie, you're still asleep, aren't you? Yi Qianqian glanced behind her. Chapter 1835. Yi Qianqian felt that something was amiss and asked, Yes. What's wrong? It's nothing. It's just that Manting's room has been vacant for a long time. Why is Zhilie living there? He didn't even ask Nanny to clean it up. It's all right, Auntie. It's quite clean and comfortable inside. Zhilie brought me a set of clean bedding. I lay down and fell asleep. Yi Qianqian smiled innocently. Mrs. Shen's expression visibly relaxed. This made Yi Qianqian even more curious. Was there something in Shen Manting's room that couldn't be seen by others? Everyone in the family was having breakfast. Nanny went to Shen Zhilie's room to call for him. She called him twice before there was a response. After about 10 minutes, Shen Zhilie came out in his pajamas. He looked like he had just woken up. Good morning, Dad. Good morning, Mom. Good morning, Nanny. Shen Zhilie yawned and said, Good morning, wife. Yi Qianqian was a little embarrassed. In the words of Northerners, wife was equivalent to wife. Yi Qianqian blushed slightly. She sat by the side and took the breakfast that Nanny had prepared for her without saying a word. Shen Zhilie sat next to Yi Qianqian naturally. He glanced at her and asked, Where's Grandma? She's still in the room. I just want to call her, but she seems to be in the middle of a divination, Nanny whispered. Old people always think too much. Young people don't have to worry so much. This is the era of science. It's better not to believe in such superstitious things. We won't believe it. No matter what, Grandma has ruined my brother and sister Manting. I won't believe in such nonsense again. Shen Zhilie took the breakfast that Nanny handed him and asked, By the way, where has my brother been recently? I heard that he's on a business trip. Who knows? He often disappears without a trace. Shen Longyue was reading the newspaper. When he spoke, he put the newspaper away and said, Take good care of Qianqian. Since she's pregnant, there are some things that you have to pay attention to. I have an important meeting in the next 2 days, so I have to go on a business trip. The day after tomorrow, we'll visit Qianqian's house and propose marriage. Yi Qianqian couldn't react. Was she pregnant? She felt guilty and glanced at Shun Jilya. She didn't know what Shun Jilya's skin was made of, but he looked very calm. He nodded his head and said, sure. Qianqian still has to go back to work. She'll be returning to Kingstown tomorrow. I have to go back to the hospital and apply for leave. All right, you guys go first. Your mother and I will be there the day after tomorrow. What are you going to do the day after tomorrow? An old voice with a bit of vitality could be heard. The old lady walked over and said, what do you want to do? Grandma, it's time for dinner, Shun Jilya called out. At the same time, he nudged Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian immediately called out, Grandma. Old Mrs. Shun didn't look too happy and said, you want to propose the day after tomorrow? Betrothal gifts? Yes, Mom. Please sit down and talk. Mrs. Shun stood up and pulled out a stool for old Mrs. Shun. No, I don't agree. Old Mrs. Shun shoved the stool back. Qianqian has a short lifeline on her hand. Of all the places to put it, it just had to be on her lifeline. Mom, what era is it now? Do you still believe in such things? It's fine as long as the child likes it. Chapter 1836. Old Mrs. Shun's words were very direct. As she spoke, she looked at Shun Longyue with an unhappy expression. Yi Qianqian felt a little awkward. She had heard from Yi Yuyu that if the old lady didn't like someone, she could be very merciless. Previously, when she liked Yu Lily, Yi Qianqian hadn't noticed this characteristic of the old lady. But now, Yi Qianqian had witnessed it clearly and had no choice but to believe it. However, to Yi Qianqian's surprise, Shun Jilya had previously said that he didn't have much of a love life. She had never believed him. Now that she had received confirmation from the old lady, Yi Qianqian couldn't help but look at Shun Jilya again. How can you curse someone like that? Qianqian is fine now because of your curse. Shun Jilya looked a little angry. It was fine in the first place. Qianqian has always been living well. Now, you want her to die at 28 years old with just one sentence. How can you do this? Jilya, I don't want to do this either. I know that it's rare for you to like a girl, but I'm just playing it safe. Shun Jilya pursed his lips and didn't say another word. He stood up and took Yi Qianqian's hand to leave. When old Mrs. Shun saw this, she panicked and yelled, where are you going? I'm going to have my fortune read to see if it's as mysterious as you say. Shun Jilya took Yi Qianqian's hand and walked away from the dining table in a few steps. When old Mrs. Shun heard that, she snorted and said, do you still need others at a time like this? The experts that I, your granny, know are all over the place. How could your people have met my wife? They just listen to what you say, Shun Jilya said. Shun Jilya was a little annoyed. I think she's very good. She even brought you a gift. She's not bad to you. Why do you have to slander her like this? What do you mean slander? If I hadn't read her fortune, would I have said that to you? Why didn't you read Lily's palm at that time? Lily's physiognomy is very good. You could tell at a glance what her fortune is like. But when Qianqian first came in, you said she had the face of wealth. She did have the face of wealth, but her life was short. Old Mrs. Shun said matter-of-factly, I can't let you marry a short-lived woman. You're so stubborn. If she really dies... Bah! Shun Jilya was furious. Grandma, as an elder, you're cursing the younger generation. You're also a self-proclaimed half-immortal. Don't you know that's a taboo? Old Mrs. Shun was speechless. Grandma, Yi Qianqian suddenly spoke up. She looked at old Mrs. Shun and said, what you're saying is that I'm destined to live a life of riches and honor, and that I'm destined to die young, right? That's what I think, and that's the conclusion I got from my old friend. Old Mrs. Shun looked at Yi Qianqian with pity in her eyes. It's not that I don't like you, but our Jilya... Chapter 1837. Yi Qianqian's words were clear. She pulled out all of her family's wealth and laid it out in front of them. Shun Jilya silently hugged Yi Qianqian tightly and comforted her. Yi Qianqian glanced at Shun Jilya and continued, when I was in high school, my grandmother contracted a very serious illness. At that time, she underwent continuous chemotherapy for several years. After struggling for several years, she finally couldn't take it anymore and passed away. At that time, our family was in dire straits. I had to work outside to be able to pay for my normal living and school fees. When I was in college, I almost dropped out, but my best friend helped me. That's why I'm where I am today. Grandma, does this kind of fate count as a life of wealth to you? Yi Qianqian's words were very firm. She looked at old Mrs. Shun, and every word that came out of her mouth was unquestionable. Old Mrs. Shun frowned when she heard that. Shun Longyue and Mrs. Shun were a little moved when they heard that. It's not easy for anyone to live in this world. I started from scratch, but your grandmother still said that I didn't accomplish anything in my life. Shun Longyue took a sip of milk and said with a sigh, although your grandmother wasn't a psychic back then, she still went to ask her old friends and came to the conclusion. There's no difference. Longyue, how can you talk about your mother like that? Mom, times are different now. Don't believe in such things anymore. Shun Longyue looked helpless. Juliet isn't young anymore. It's not easy for him to find a girl he likes. Why do you have to break them up? You've said it yourself that doing such a thing will shorten your lifespan. It's my own grandson. It doesn't matter if my life is shortened. I'm doing it for Juliet's sake. I don't believe in such things. Shun Juliet held Yi Qianqian in his arms. Let's go. Shun Juliet ignored her and led Yi Qianqian into his room. Yi Qianqian looked at Shun Juliet and asked, do you really not believe it? Shun Juliet rummaged through his closet and took out a set of casual clothes. He looked at Yi Qianqian and said, of course not. Didn't I tell you last night? But I think it's better to believe in these things. He turned to look at Yi Qianqian as if he had seen a ghost and asked, Yi Qianqian, do you really think you're going to die? Yi Qianqian turned her head away in embarrassment and said softly, actually, someone has said something like that before. Shun Juliet frowned. He looked at Yi Qianqian and waited for her to continue. Right in front of our town, there's a blind man. We call him Uncle Blind Man. Uncle Blind Man is possessed by a god. It's said that he can invite both gods and ghosts. He read your fortune for you? Not really. I thought he was just joking. What did he say? He said, the little girl's life isn't bad, but you have to be careful of villains and be careful of your life. Did he really say that? I don't remember the specifics, but that's the general idea. Shun Juliet was silent for a moment. He took off his clothes and put on a shirt before saying, let's go back to Yin Town and get to the bottom of this. Can't we wait until tomorrow? Didn't they say that they would register their marriage on Monday? Chapter 1838. I'm going to get the household registration booklet, Shun Juliet said softly as he held Yi Qianqian's head in his hands. We're going to get our marriage certificate tomorrow. Your grandfather passed away, and I haven't visited him yet. I'll go pay my respects tomorrow. Yi Qianqian was stunned. How did you know? Your sister told me about it yesterday. Shun Juliet's eyes were filled with guilt. I'm sorry. It's just a quarrel. I shouldn't have ignored what's going on around you. If you hadn't told me about it yesterday, I'm afraid I wouldn't have known about it today. Yi Qianqian pursed her lips, suddenly feeling a little sad. She opened her arms and hugged Shun Juliet. In a soft voice, she said, it's not your fault. It's all my fault. I didn't trust you. Shun Juliet rested his chin on her head and whispered, Qianqian, no matter what happens in the future, you must trust me. As long as you ask me, I won't lie to you. Yes, if I've done anything wrong to you, you're welcome to stab me to death with a knife. Uff. Yi Qianqian burst out laughing. She slapped him on the chest and said coquettishly, go away. If I stab you to death, I'll have to go to jail. Shun Juliet smiled and gently released her. He packed a few simple clothes and stuffed them into Yi Qianqian's suitcase. Then, Shun Juliet dashed into his parents' room, flipped through the household register, and snuck back. When Yi Qianqian and Shun Juliet walked out, old Mrs. Shun was having breakfast. Seeing that they were carrying a bag, he immediately became alert and asked, where are you going? I'll leave first. Grandma, Uncle, Auntie, thank you for your hospitality. Yi Qianqian smiled and said, I have to work tomorrow. If I rush back today, I'll be able to work tomorrow. Where is Julia? Of course I'm sending her to the airport. While he was at it, he could also go to Cloud Town for a walk. However, Shun Jilia didn't finish his sentence. He simply picked up Yi Qianqian's suitcase and walked out. The two of them hailed a taxi and arrived at the airport in about 50 minutes. After buying the nearest ticket to Cloud Town Airport, the two quickly boarded the plane. When they arrived at Cloud Town, it was around 11 o'clock in the afternoon. The two of them ate something on the plane and went straight home. Some people in town were surprised to see Yi Qianqian. However, when they saw the young man beside her, they began to talk among themselves. Isn't that Yi Qianqian's ex-boyfriend? The one who did that to Fong Tong Tong? I don't think so. They did that kind of thing and they're still together? If that's not the case, then she's changing men too quickly. Of course, Yi Qianqian also noticed the gazes around them, but she didn't care. She pulled Shinjilia along and headed home. When they entered the house, Yi Jinhua was very surprised. He looked at Yi Qianqian and Shinjilia and exclaimed, Why are you together again? Didn't we break up? Yi Qianqian was a little embarrassed. She coughed lightly and said, I'm fine again. Yi Jinhua looked at his daughter's blushing face and found it strange. He looked at Shun Juliet with a faint smile and asked, You're here? He's here. Shun Juliet smiled brightly, revealing 8 neat, white teeth. Uncle, I'm here to pay my respects to Grandpa. Yeah. Yi Jinhua put down the flowers in his hand and led Shun Juliet inside. Grandpa's morning hall was set up in the living room. The moment he entered, he could smell the incense. Chapter 1839. Hello, Grandpa. Shun Julia knelt down as well. I'm Xiao Shun. I'm sorry that I didn't come to see you one last time when you passed away. But don't worry, I'll treat your granddaughter well in the future. I won't let Qianqian be bullied. I swear here. After Shun Julia finished speaking, he placed the incense sticks in the ground and kowtowed 3 times. Yi Jinhua looked at Shun Julia intently and said, I hope you're not making empty promises. Although Qianqian is a girl, she's still a treasure in our family. Don't worry, Uncle. I'll treat Qianqian well. I'm here now to tell you that I've already spoken to my family. My father said that he'll come to propose marriage in 2 days, but I want to register my marriage with Qianqian first. Shinjilia sounded very sincere when he said this. He stared at Yi Jinhua and almost called him Dad. Yi Qianqian felt a little uneasy. She was still concerned about what Shinjilia's grandmother had said. What if she really couldn't live past the age of 28? What should she do? Moreover, according to old Mrs. Shun, it seemed that it would be very difficult for her to get pregnant. Yi Qianqian felt a little sad. She looked at Shun Julia's sincere eyes and suddenly felt that it was a little unfair to him. Old Shun, Yi Qianqian called out, interrupting Shun Julia's words. Shun Julia looked over, and Yi Jinhua also turned his head to look at his daughter. Yi Qianqian looked at Shun Julia and said, Let's talk first. Shun Julia had a bad feeling about this. He looked at Yi Qianqian and asked, What do you want to say? Come with me. Yi Qianqian pulled Shun Julia out of the room. Shun Julia was pulled away. When he saw Yi Qianqian's solemn expression, he felt that something was wrong. Yi Qianqian pulled him into the room. Shun Julia stared at her and asked, What do you want to say? I think, when Yi Qianqian saw Shun Julia talking to her father, she felt that she had a lot to say. But now, she couldn't say a word. Shun Julia raised his eyebrows. What's wrong? I think there must be some basis to what your grandmother said. After all, this kind of thing is superstition, but hasn't China believed in this for 5,000 years? It's best if it's not true, but if it's true and I really die at 28, then enough. Shun Julia's expression darkened. Yi Qianqian, what do you think I like about you? Huh? Yi Qianqian couldn't react for a moment. You're so timid. Do you really believe what Grandma said? Yi Qianqian didn't say anything. Her attitude was equivalent to a silent agreement. Shinjilia grew even angrier. He said, Even if you're really dead, I'll accept it. Who asked me to choose this path? But Shinjilia emphasized the last 2 words. Grandma's words can't be trusted. I've never believed Grandma's words. She even told me a bunch of nonsense about fortune-telling. She told me how great I'd be in this life and how beautiful my future wife would be. But look in the mirror now. Is she beautiful? Shinjilia's eyes widened. The corners of Yi Qianqian's eyes twitched. She couldn't react for a moment. She said that the child I gave birth to would be smart, but look at yourself. With your genes, do you think you can be smart? Chapter 1840. Julia held her down and said, I'm just giving you an example. Look, it turns out that grandmother's words aren't accurate. Sometimes you're just unlucky. It's just a coincidence. We're not married yet. Who can guarantee that I'm the wife your grandmother said you're going to marry? Besides, grandmother said it's difficult for me to have children. I think your wife might not be me, but someone else. Julia lost his temper. A sense of helplessness and defeat engulfed him from the bottom of his heart. Yi Qianqian, do you really believe grandmother's words? Yi Qianqian pouted. She seemed to be acting coquettishly and aggrieved. I don't want to believe it either, but didn't she say that Yu would have a second marriage? Didn't it come true? I think she forced Yu to divorce my brother. Is she going to let her die alone? A second marriage is only a matter of time. Is that so? Yi Qianqian didn't quite believe him. However, when she saw the obvious unhappy expression on Julia's face, she nodded and said, that seems to make sense. Anyway, I don't believe in that. Julia reached out and pinched Yi Qianqian's face. You're not allowed to believe it either. Didn't you say that there's a blind uncle in town? Let's go take a look. Now, yeah. Julia pulled her. Since we're already here, we'll naturally go look for the blind uncle after paying our respects to grandfather. All right. Let's go buy some gifts. Yi Qianqian walked into the house and picked up her purse. She was a little hesitant. What's wrong? Yi Qianqian looked very uncomfortable. She looked at Julia and said, on our way to the blind uncle's house, we'll pass by a small shop. We could buy some gifts on the way. Huh? Let's go then. Julia didn't notice the problem. But that small shop is owned by Fong Tong Tong. Yi Qianqian smiled, but there was a hint of awkwardness in her smile. She said, why don't we take a detour? It'll be awkward if we see her. What's there to be awkward about? Julia glanced at her. We're going to show her what we look like now. Julia straightened his clothes and pulled Yi Qianqian out. Wait a minute. Yi Qianqian tugged at him. Don't you know what happened to Tong Tong? How could I not know? I'm one of the people involved. Julia found it funny and smiled. She confessed to you afterward, didn't she? No. Yi Qianqian could tell that Julia didn't seem to know anything about Fong Tong Tong. She struggled for a moment and looked at Julia. She suddenly found it difficult to speak. Julia raised his eyebrows slightly. What are you trying to say? It's when my grandfather passed away, she came to look for me. She said some disgusting things to me, so I chased her away. Well done. But something happened to her on her way home. Yi Qianqian's expression was grave, and Julia could vaguely sense that things were not as simple as they seemed. There's a high school classmate in our town. Some time ago, he came back to the town to settle down. His father has some mental problems. When he was young, his wife ran away with someone. That day, for some reason, he was squatting in the woods. When Tong Tong passed by, he dragged her in and then... Chapter 1841. Yeah. Julia's calm voice rang out. He didn't seem to have much emotion in it. Julia looked down at Yi Qianqian and said softly, I know. Yi Qianqian was stunned and looked up. Julia clearly saw the sadness in Yi Qianqian's eyes. He reached out and gently caressed her face. You told me yourself. Have you forgotten? Yi Qianqian didn't react. I told you. Yeah. Julia seemed a little helpless. A few days ago, when you called me for the first time, you told me. Is that so? Yi Qianqian suddenly remembered and nodded. Yes, I told you. You told me that Fong Tong Tong cried a lot after the incident, and her mother was also very sad. That's what you said. Yeah. Do you know why I called you at that time? Why? When Fong Tong Tong's accident happened, it was the second day after my grandfather passed away. I went to the hospital to visit her a few times. She was in a very bad state at that time. During the examination, the doctor said that she had a torn vagina. Julia looked at Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian felt a little guilty. She lowered her head and said, after she was discharged from the hospital and grandfather's funeral was over, I returned to Kingstown the next day. That's why I called you. So, after you found out that I never had sex with her, you wanted to get back together with me, right? Yi Qianqian blushed, but she still braced herself and nodded honestly. Shenjilie took a deep breath. He didn't know whether he was angry or helpless. He raised his hand and waved it to the side, but he didn't know what to do. Yi Qianqian quickly pressed his hand down and said, I was wrong. Well, that's good too. At least the facts proved my innocence. Shenjilie sighed and said, but it's a pity for Fong Tong Tong. I didn't expect her to be a virgin. Yeah, Yi Qianqian felt a little sorry for her. But it's still necessary for us to show our faces. These are two separate matters. We're just going out to buy something. It's not like we're deliberately provoking her. Let's go. Shenjilie held Yi Qianqian's hand and headed out. Yi Qianqian was dumbfounded. She was dragged along by him. When Yi Qianqian arrived at the entrance of Fong Tong Tong's shop, she looked at the store that she had not seen in a long time. She felt a little sour in her heart. Shenjilie didn't feel too emotional. He pulled Yi Qianqian forward and stood in front of it, looking around. Fong Tong Tong was stunned when she saw them. Yi Qianqian smiled and waved at her. Hi, Shenjilie asked, do you have candy? The kind that comes in a gift box. When Fong Tong Tong heard Shenjilie's words, she felt a little upset. Fong Tong Tong pursed her lips and stood up. She replied, I do. What flavor do you want? Whatever, as long as you can give it to someone. Shenjilie acted as if he didn't know her. I'm going to look for the blind uncle that Qianqian mentioned. I'm going to ask for his horoscope so that I can propose marriage in a few days. Fong Tong Tong's hand, which was in the middle of retrieving the candy, shrank back. She was a little annoyed. When he turned his head, he saw Yi Qianqian tugging at Shenjilie. Are you guys getting married? Fong Tong Tong asked. Shenjilie raised his eyebrows slightly. Yeah, didn't you say that you didn't want to get married? Why are you thinking about it now? Fong Tong Tong asked as she looked at Yi Qianqian. Chapter 1842. When Shenjilie said this, he raised his eyebrows slightly, and his smile was still as bright as the sun, just like when they first met. However, the current Fong Tong Tong was no longer the Fong Tong Tong of the past. Yi Qianqian looked at Fong Tong Tong's obviously unhappy expression. She tugged at Shenjilie and said, Tong Tong, I feel that we're not young anymore. Since we're going to get married sooner or later, I wanted to ask about candy? Yeah. Fong Tong Tong placed the box of candy in front of them and placed it in a nice-looking bag. Take it. You don't have to give it back. That won't do. Favors are favors, and business is business. Shenjilie took out his wallet. I'm a person who likes to be clear about things. Yi Qianqian felt that there was something wrong with Shenjilie, but she couldn't tell what it was. There seemed to be nothing wrong with his every move and every word. Shenjilie took out a $100 bill and placed it on the counter. How much is it? Fong Tong Tong looked at the bill and felt even more uncomfortable. She pushed the bill back. I've stayed in your house for a few days, and I haven't paid rent yet. It's only a few dozen dollars. Take it. Shenjilie looked at her. Fong Tong Tong's eyes were a little red, and he could vaguely see her embarrassment. All right. Shenjilie took the money back. Thank you. As he spoke, Shenjilie picked up the box of candy and turned to leave. Yi Qianqian looked at Fong Tong Tong with a complicated expression. She sighed in her heart. After thinking about it, she said, Then we'll leave first. Yeah, Fong Tong Tong replied dryly as she watched them leave. After they left, a shout came from inside the house. Tong Tong, it's time to eat. Fong Tong Tong stared ahead and said after a while, Mom, Qianqian is getting married. When Mrs. Fong heard this, she walked out and said in disbelief, So soon? Didn't she just break up with her man? They're dating again. They just came to buy candy together and said they wanted to go to Uncle Blind Man's place to get their horoscope. Mrs. Fong was a little surprised. How can this girl talk about marriage in the year her grandfather passed away? It's inauspicious. You have to remind her. But after saying that, he suddenly thought of something. He looked at his daughter and said, Forget it. In any case, it has nothing to do with us. Let's eat. It's all done. Yeah. Fong Tong Tong stood up and headed inside. Yi Qianqian rarely visited the area. Although she knew that the blind uncle lived in the area, she didn't know which house he lived in. Along the way, he finally found the place where Uncle Blind was. The blind uncle lived in a one-story bungalow. The outside of the bungalow was rough. As soon as he walked in, he was amazed by the antique style inside. Before he even entered the door, he could already smell the thick scent of incense. There was a praying mat inside, and on top of it was an altar on which various bodhisattvas were enshrined. Yi Qianqian didn't know much about it. She only recognized Guan Yin Bodhisattva, Manju Shri Bodhisattva, and Sakyamuni Buddha. As for the rest, Yi Qianqian only saw their appearances and didn't know their names. He's here. Yi Qianqian was startled when she heard a slightly hoarse voice. A short figure with a stooped back walked out from the inside slowly. Chapter 1843. Uncle Blind Man's eyes were devoid of any darkness. Yi Qianqian was a little frightened at first glance. Shunjilia calmed down a little. He glanced at Yi Qianqian and said, "Is this Uncle Blind Man?" His voice was very soft. Yi Qianqian nodded her head. Uncle Blind Man chuckled softly. "I knew you would come. Do you find it a little hard to accept?" He was speaking in the dialect of Yintown. Shunjilia didn't quite understand, but Yi Qianqian's expression immediately changed. She looked into Uncle Blind Man's eyes with some lingering fear. She seemed to be very nervous and asked, "Uncle, how did you know I would come today?" "Buddha told me." Uncle Blind Man's expression was natural. There was no darkness in his eyes, but at that moment, Yi Qianqian felt that he had seen through everything. With this realization, Yi Qianqian felt a little creeped out. "Don't be afraid. Come in and have a seat." Uncle Blind Man turned around and walked briskly. He crossed one threshold after another, passed through the temple, and finally reached the hall inside. Yi Qianqian held Shunjilia's hand and followed him in. As she walked, she felt more and more strange. Shunjilia was still holding the candy in his hand. Yi Qianqian saw it and picked it up. "Uncle, I brought you some candy. I'll put it on the table for you." "That's very kind of you, good girl." Uncle Blind Man took out 2 stools from inside. They were invisible, but they didn't bump into anything along the way. "Have a seat." Shunjilia found it a little strange, so he didn't stand on ceremony and sat down. Uncle Blind Man walked in front of Yi Qianqian and said, "Give me your hand." Yi Qianqian's heart was beating fast. She stretched out her right hand. There was a red line on this hand. The red line happened to cross the lifeline, and it crossed the career and marriage lines diagonally. Uncle Blind Man caressed Yi Qianqian's hand. He touched the back of her hand and then the palm of her hand. Shunjilia watched from the side, and his brows furrowed. That's not right. If Uncle Blind Man hadn't been blind, Shunjilia would probably have thought that he was taking advantage of Yi Qianqian. 8 characters. The old and steady voice was hoarse. This time, Shunjilia understood. Yi Qianqian immediately told him her horoscope. The blind uncle nodded and said, "My fate is good. My 8 characters are wonderful. I was born at the most auspicious time of the year. If I was born 2 hours earlier or 2 hours later, it would be a great misfortune. This is fate." Yi Qianqian had always believed in such things. When she heard what he said, she actually felt a little scared. "Bring prosperity to your husband and children. Bring prosperity to your father and mother, but not to your in-laws. If you get married, don't live with your in-laws. You have to be careful of villains." When Yi Qianqian heard that, she immediately understood what was going on. Could it be Shunjilia's grandmother? Other than Shunjilia's grandmother, it seemed that everyone else in the Shun family was pretty good. "Uncle," Yi Qianqian said, "some elders say that I'll live a short life. What do you think? Beware of villains. If the villains succeed, you might become infertile." Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat. Those words seemed to match up with what the old lady had said. But you don't have to worry too much. There are causes and effects in this world. If you do good and accumulate virtue, the heavens will see it. Uncle Blind Man had a smile on his face. His fingers caressed Yi Qianqian's palm. His fingers slid across her smooth palm, repeatedly touching the thin red line. 5 minutes can only be 4 minutes. There is still a midnight makeup. Chapter 1844. Shin Juliet couldn't help but ask, "What is he doing?" No matter how he looked at it, Shun Juliet felt that he was taking advantage of Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian shook her head gently at him and turned to look at her hand. Uncle Blind had a smile on his lips the entire time. "Is this your boyfriend?" "Yes, Uncle. We plan to get married." "Well, you can get married, but it's not the right year," the blind man said. "Your luck isn't good this year. It's best to get married after you're 28. Yi Qianqian was shocked. 28? Yes, 28. The blind man smiled. 28 is your lucky year. You can get married before that, but your luck will be a little worse. Worse? Yes, worse. He held Yi Qianqian's hand and said, "I left this thread for you. Your sister's luck isn't good, but yours is. When you were born, your father asked me to give some of your luck to her. How is your sister doing now?" Yi Qianqian's eyes widened in shock. "That's right." Yi Qianqian was a little dizzy. "That's my sister." The blind man shook his head. "She's my sister. I'm older than her by more than an hour. You were born nearly 2 hours earlier than her, but she's your sister." The blind uncle smiled amiably. "It's not good for a woman to have too much luck. If you break your luck and make up for your sister's luck, then your luck will be even. But now, your sister's calamity has passed, but your calamity has yet to arrive." "Disaster." Yi Qianqian was a little flustered. "What disaster?" The blind man shook his head. "I don't know. You'll know when the time comes." The time had come. When would it be the time? Yi Qianqian subconsciously glanced at Shun Juliet. Shun Juliet had been paying attention to them, but they had been speaking in a dialect for a long time. He still didn't know what they were talking about. "Can I still get married?" 28. Is the disaster a villain? It might be, and it might not be. It was ambiguous. Yi Qianqian could tell that the blind man didn't know either. Her heart sank as she continued. "Should I show you my boyfriend's horoscope?" "You can look, but don't look," Uncle Blind said. "They're experts in his family. Don't offend them." She hadn't said anything, but the blind uncle already knew everything. "It's him, Achi. She said that my life would be short and I wouldn't be able to have children. The red thread in my hand was a short lifeline, but it was broken on my lifeline. I'm going to die at 28. The blind uncle chuckled and said, "Not really, but it's really not good for the man's family." She deliberately exaggerated it, but it's not that serious. "So she doesn't want us to be together?" "I don't know." Yi Qianqian sighed softly, feeling a little defeated. For a moment, it was as if she had learned a lot of things. However, she would rather not know about them. That way, she would be more at ease. Young people shouldn't sigh. Good luck will be sighed away. The blind uncle patted Yi Qianqian's hand. "Just wait. When the time comes, everything will be fine." "Thank you, Uncle. Your boyfriend likes you very much, but you have to be careful of villains." She had to be careful of villains again. How many villains did she have to be careful of? Chapter 1845. After listening to the blind uncle's words, Yi Qianqian suddenly felt as if her life had been spoiled. But when she thought about it carefully, she didn't seem to have anyone around her that she needed to guard against. Fong Tong Tong used to be her best friend, but now she didn't dare to trust her anymore. It was difficult to draw a tiger's bones just by drawing its skin. You might know a person's face, but not his heart. However, what did Uncle Blind Man's last sentence mean? Don't guard against others. Was he talking about Fong Tong Tong? After chatting with the blind uncle for a while, Yi Qianqian left some money for him to buy some supplement for his health and left. After she came out, Yi Qianqian said to Shun Julia, "Uncle said that we might not be able to get married this year." "Why?" Shun Julia's expression became solemn. "Why can't we get married? Is it because your grandfather passed away this year?" "Well, that's one of the reasons, but..." Yi Qianqian pulled Shun Julia along and said as they walked, "Uncle said that my luck is too good and my sister's luck is too bad, so he gave half of my luck to my sister. Now my sister's disaster is over, but my disaster has yet to come." As she spoke, she looked up at Shun Julia with an aggrieved expression and said, "The disaster is coming. I might not be able to conceive." "What do you mean? What disaster?" Shun Julia felt that it was a fantasy. What the hell? If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have come here. I didn't understand a single word of what you said just now. You didn't translate it for me so that I could question him in person. How could I? I'd rather believe it than not. I think I should believe it. Besides, didn't your grandmother also say that I might not be able to conceive? That's impossible. Julia stopped walking and turned sideways to hold her face. That's because we used to use contraception for fear of getting pregnant. Why don't we try not to use contraception in the future? Now is not the time to talk about this. Yi Qian felt a little annoyed. Uncle has always told me to be on guard against villains. How can I have so many villains around me? Huh? Speaking of which, didn't you meet one before? Who are you talking about? Yi Qian looked at Julia as if she had already guessed it. Is it Tong Tong? What do you think? Uncle also told me not to be too guarded against people. I think Tong Tong is still kind after all. It's just that she was a little confused about the previous matter. There will definitely not be such a thing in the future. You still want to reconcile with her? No. Yi Qian was a little sad. But, after all, we've known each other for so many years. I think, yeah, got it. Julia held her in his arms. Did he tell you who you should be wary of? Who would tell you like that? Wouldn't that be a prophecy? Was what he said before not a prophecy? Julia raised his eyebrows. There's nothing different. Did he tell you what kind of disaster could cause infertility? I don't know. Yi Qian scratched her head. It's a villain. That's why it's the same as not saying anything. You can't say that. At the very least, I'll be on guard. Yi Qian held his arm. But we can't get married this year. What will happen if I get married? My luck will suffer another setback. In other words, I'll be even more unlucky. When Julia heard that, he immediately gave up, but he was still a little unwilling. When can we get married? You're already 26. Chapter 1846. Julia's eyes widened as he stared at Yi Qian, and the expression on his face became indescribable. No matter how he looked at it, the expression on Yi Qian's face didn't look like she was joking. After a long while, Julia asked weakly, "Did that blind uncle tell you that?" "Yes," Yi Qian said. Yi Qian also hoped that it wasn't true, but the blind uncle had no reason to trick her. Nodding his head, Julia looked at her and sighed. Young people shouldn't sigh. Julia looked at her and raised his eyebrows slightly. Yi Qian repeated Uncle Blind Man's words and said, "When young people sigh, they will sigh away all their good fortune." Julia smiled, but at the same time, he felt a deep sense of helplessness. He held Yi Qian in his arms and asked, "What should we do? What else can I do?" Yi Qian hung her head. "Didn't grandmother say that I might not live past the age of 28? It's better not to get married. Otherwise, you'll have to mark me as a widower on your household register. How ugly would that be?" Julia rubbed her face and said through gritted teeth, "You're talking nonsense." She looked at Julia and pouted. In a muffled voice, she said, "It's 2 years. If one of us has a change of heart or has an affair, there's still a chance to turn things around." TSK. Julia released her face and held her in his arms. In a gentle voice, he said, "In that case, I should be on my guard and keep an eye on you. I can't let you have the chance to come into contact with the flowers and plants outside. Hey, I'm just afraid that you'll have a change of heart. Don't worry, it can't be me." Julia's face was full of confidence. He lowered his head to look at Yi Qian's face and whispered, "You won't either." Yi Qian's heart warmed, and a triumphant smile appeared on her face as she replied, "Humph. Of course I won't. I'm so devoted and devoted." As she spoke, she bumped into Julia. Julia gently bumped into her. "Shall we go back to Kingstown?" Yi Qian slammed into him again and grunted. "Yeah, let's go back. We can't get married anyway." Julia chuckled and opened his arms to hug her. "Isn't it just a certificate? We'll leave it at the Bureau of Civil Affairs for now. We'll take it back when we're in a better mood." Yi Qian was amused by him and pinched his waist. "Why are you so shameless? Huh? Let's go back and tell your father." By the time they returned to Kingstown, it was already dark. By the time Julia and Yi Qian arrived home in a taxi, it was already past midnight. As soon as he got out of the car, he saw a few police cars parked at the entrance of the neighborhood. Red and blue sirens flashed. Yi Qianqian looked inside, confused. Shen Julia went up to a policeman and asked, "Officer, may I ask what's going on?" The policeman glanced at him and Yi Qianqian. His eyes fell on their suitcases and he asked, "Do you live here?" "Yes, we'll stay here." The policeman quickly took out a small booklet and said, "Which building and which unit?" Can I ask what happened?" A real gun was found in the garden of her neighborhood, and drug residue was also found on the handle of the gun. They are now doing a screening. Both of their hearts trembled when they heard this. Chapter 1847. After cooperating with the police for an investigation, Yi Qianqian and Shen Julia were registered with their identification cards and proof of residency from the property management to prove that they were residents of the neighborhood. After confirming that there was nothing out of the ordinary, they were released. The entire process took half an hour. Although it wasn't a big deal, Yi Qianqian still felt uncomfortable when she encountered such a thing. She looked up at Shen Julia and asked, "Why did this happen out of nowhere? I feel like my luck hasn't been too good recently. Why do I keep encountering such unpleasant things?" "It's okay. Don't overthink it. The more you think about it, the more unpleasant it will feel." Shen Julia patted Yi Qianqian's head. "All right, wash up and go to sleep. I'll call the hospital. I won't be going back tomorrow." "You didn't ask for leave?" Yi Qianqian secretly clicked her tongue. "That works? Aren't you afraid that the hospital will fire you?" "Don't worry. The people at the hospital want me more than anything." Shen Julia patted her head. "Go take a shower." "Okay." Yi Qianqian stretched and found her pajamas in the room. Then she went into the bathroom. Shen Julia helped her pack her luggage and put it away before he went to do his own things. Yi Qianqian was exhausted. Her eyelids were fighting to stay open in the shower. When she was done, she saw Shen Julia on the phone on the balcony. She greeted him and went back to her room to sleep. Shen Julia's lips curled up slightly. He leaned against the railing of the balcony. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of fire from the corner of his eye. He saw it unintentionally, and it was extremely clear. Shen Julia's heart skipped a beat. When he turned his head to look, there was no trace of it. It was as if he had been hallucinating. Shen Julia immediately thought of what the police had said to them in the neighborhood. There might be a drug addict with a gun in this neighborhood. A drug addict was scary enough. If he had a gun and lost control of his emotions, it would be very dangerous. Shen Julia pursed his lips and looked around. After making sure there was nothing out of the ordinary, he closed the floor-to-ceiling windows on the balcony and entered the room. He walked into the room slowly. When he saw Yi Qianqian sleeping soundly, he felt relieved. He adjusted Yi Qianqian's sleeping position and covered her with a blanket before he went to take a shower. But halfway through, a scream came from outside. No, it was Yi Qianqian. Shen Julia made up his mind. He immediately opened the door and rushed out. Shen Julia, Yi Qianqian's voice was much softer than before. He rushed into the room barefoot and turned on the lights. She had kicked the blanket away. Her eyes were tightly shut, and her hair was slightly disheveled. Shen Julia heaved a huge sigh of relief. He stepped forward and pulled Yi Qianqian back. Yi Qianqian shuddered and snapped out of her reverie. The light in the room was a little dazzling. She squinted her eyes and saw the person in front of her clearly. Shen Julia had bubbles on his head, and he wasn't wearing any clothes. When Yi Qianqian saw him, she immediately perked up. Her eyes widened as she asked, "What are you doing?" When Shen Julia saw her reaction, he was both annoyed and amused. "You scared me to death. Do you know what kind of dream you just had?" Feeling a little embarrassed, she asked, "Was I talking in my sleep?" Chapter 1848. Yi Qianqian looked at him and blushed. She gave him a kick and said, "Go wash up before you come back." Shen Julia had no choice. After washing up, he wrapped a bath towel around himself and walked out. As soon as he came back and sat on the edge of the bed, Yi Qianqian came up to him and hugged him from behind. Shen Julia's heart softened. He put his big hand on her soft hand and asked softly, "What did you dream of just now?" "I dreamed that you took our child to jump off a building." Yi Qianqian pouted and looked aggrieved. "I called you from below, and kept telling you not to, but you still walked forward and threw the child down. Shunjulia laughed and turned to look at Yi Qianqian's pitiful look. He reached out and flicked her forehead. Yi Qianqian immediately covered her head. Her eyes were watery, and she pouted. When Shunjulia saw this, he suddenly felt that he had done something wrong. Does it hurt a lot? Sob, sob, sob. Yi Qianqian opened her arms and hugged him. Why did you throw the child down? Shunjulia was speechless. He couldn't help but laugh as he hugged her. Hey, I didn't. I told you that it was a dream. Dreams are always the opposite. Look, we don't even have a child now. Yi Qianqian's sadness was suddenly blown away by his words. She clenched her fist and hammered it on his chest. Then she pushed him away. Go away. Shunjulia wasn't pushed away. He held her hand and lay down. It's easy to solve the problem of not having a child. Let's have one. Yi Qianqian blushed and glared at him. She looked down at his lower body, which was only wrapped in a bath towel. She knew that he had planned this. She pushed him with her knee. I don't want to. I want to sleep. Then you sleep. I'll be gentle. You. Resistance was futile. Yi Qianqian was still firmly suppressed. Other than biting the landlord who bullied her, she couldn't control herself. When it was over, Yi Qianqian was so sleepy that she couldn't open her eyes. Shunjulia kissed the corner of her lips and said, Let's move to a bigger place. Yi Qianqian opened her eyes and asked why. Just now, when you were showering, I thought I saw someone smoking nearby. But when I looked closely, there was no one. I feel strange. It's not safe here. Are you seeing things? Yi Qianqian suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. Did you see it from the balcony? Yes. There's a winding highway in front of our building, and there aren't many houses around. How could we see someone smoking? When Yi Qianqian asked the question, the hair on her body suddenly stood on end. Really? I'm probably seeing things, but I don't feel very comfortable. Shunjulia leaned over her and gently rubbed her face. Let's change. We can also sell this place and get a bigger one. Yep. Yi Qianqian looked up at him and said, You gave me this apartment. I have to ask you first before I can sell it. It's okay. If you agree to change, I'll go and see which neighborhoods are better. This one is fine. Okay, then go and take a look. Don't buy something too expensive. A safer neighborhood will do. Yi Qianqian touched his face. But I don't have much money. My bank account. Chapter 1849. Yi Qianqian blinked and shrank her head. No, it's not like I don't want to live here. I can't put all the burden on you. It's very expensive to buy a house in Kingstown. Shunjulia chuckled. I can still afford the down payment. Don't worry. How big are you going to buy? Bigger than this. This is only a little over 70 square meters. About 150 square meters. Oh, won't it be too big for the two of us? Most importantly, it's expensive. No, we'll have children in the future. I don't think it's enough. Yi Qianqian looked up and asked, Oh, aren't you going back to the capital? You can go back to the capital if you want. If you want to settle down in the capital, you can leave the house here or sell it. Okay. Yi Qianqian was touched beyond words. She hugged Shunjulia tighter and nestled in his arms. Why are you so good to me? Yi Qianqian had never experienced all kinds of accommodations and pampering before. Shunjulia gave her all the feelings she imagined a relationship should have, and he also gave her all the qualities a husband should have. He had an outstanding family background, an admirable career, and an appearance that was hard to ignore. If it had been the Yi Qianqian of the past, she would never have imagined that her man would be like this. It was so perfect that it was unrealistic. Shunjulia's lips curled into a smile, and he said proudly, Because I'm going to abduct you. If I don't treat you well, what if you get abducted by someone else? Yi Qianqian laughed and buried herself deeper. Sleep. I'm so sleepy. Okay. Shunjulia held her hand tightly and closed his eyes. When the alarm clock rang, the sky was already bright. Yi Qianqian's body was a little sore. When she opened her eyes, Shunjulia was sleeping soundly with her in his arms. All of a sudden, he raised his hand and slapped the alarm clock down. Yi Qianqian got up and pushed him away. She yawned and got up to get dressed. Shunjulia opened his eyes and saw her snow-white back. The hickeys on it were particularly eye-catching. But soon after Yi Qianqian put on her clothes, he couldn't see them anymore. "Wake up. It's Monday. Don't you have to go to work?" Yi Qianqian pulled the blanket over his head. Shunjulia stretched his back and tossed the blanket aside. He sat up and pounced on her. Yi Qianqian couldn't react in time. She let out a cry of surprise when he pounced on her. Shunjulia planted a kiss on her cheek and said, "I'm not going to work. What do you want to eat? I'll make it for you." Yi Qianqian pushed him away and said coquettishly, "You scared me to death. What are you doing? I'll just buy some at the subway station when I go to work." "That won't do. I don't think those are fresh." "Wait a moment. I'll see what I can make for you," Shunjulia said as he stood up. Yi Qianqian threw a pillow at him in disdain. "Get dressed." "Huh." Shunjulia rummaged through the fridge, but found nothing but instant noodles and milk. In the end, he went downstairs and bought some bread. After processing it, he poured a glass of milk and turned it into a delicious breakfast. By the time Yi Qianqian finished washing up, Shunjulia had already made breakfast and was waiting for her. Just as he took a bite of the bread, Shunjulia received a call. "Julia, where are you?" "I'm in Kingstown." Chapter 1850. Shunjulia was holding the phone normally, but Yi Qianqian could clearly hear the voice coming from the other end. Yi Qianqian picked up the bread and took a bite without saying a word. Shunjulia glanced at Yi Qianqian, then stood up and walked to the balcony. Yi Qianqian looked at him and felt a little guilty. Wasn't she being too selfish? She knew that Shunjulia's grandmother didn't like her, but she still wanted to be with Shunjulia. But Shunjulia's parents seemed to have a good impression of her. Yi Qianqian felt a little conflicted. When she saw Shunjulia's helpless and angry expression, she took a sip of milk and stood up. Shunjulia looked over and looked at Yi Qianqian with a puzzled expression. Yi Qianqian didn't walk toward him. Instead, she picked up her bag and slung it over her shoulder. "I'm going to work. You haven't finished your breakfast yet." "Yep." Yi Qianqian walked over and drank the milk in one gulp. She picked up the bread and ate it as she walked. Shunjulia wanted to say something, but the phone call seemed to have become a storm. When Yi Qianqian walked out of the corridor, her heart was empty. She finished the bread quickly and pressed the button for the elevator. No hurry. No hurry. Who knew what it would be like after 2 years? Perhaps, as Shunjulia's grandmother had said, she would die at the age of 28. Or perhaps, as the blind uncle had said, she had been harmed by a villain. Or perhaps, neither of them had been accurate, and because she had revealed the secret of heaven, God had changed her fate and given her and Shunjulia a happy life. Ding! The elevator arrived at the station. There was someone inside, but Yi Qianqian didn't notice. She walked in absent-mindedly. Her mind was clouded, and she stood inside the elevator. The elevator remained silent. The person behind her suddenly said, "You haven't pressed the button for the elevator yet." It sounded like a man in his 30s. Yi Qianqian was startled by his sudden words. She instinctively looked back and saw a man dressed in black and wearing a black cap. He was very tall, and his face was mostly covered by the cap. Yi Qianqian could only see the purple pimples on half of his face. She only glanced at it for a moment before she snapped back to her senses. She turned her head and pressed the button for the first floor. After he pressed it, he suddenly remembered. She did forget to press the elevator button, but the man inside had obviously been standing there for a long time. He also knew to remind her that she hadn't pressed the button, but why didn't he come up and press the button himself? Yi Qianqian found the man a little strange and subconsciously turned her head to look at him. The man seemed to notice that Yi Qianqian was looking at him. He reached out to press down on the brim of his hat. As if he was deliberately lowering his voice, he asked, "What are you looking at? How fierce?" Yi Qianqian turned her head away and stopped looking at him. Ding! The elevator arrived. When the door opened, Yi Qianqian walked out. But before she could take a step forward, the man behind her immediately stepped forward. Yi Qianqian was caught off guard and bumped into him. By the time she came back to her senses, the man had already walked a few steps away. There was a small white bag on the ground. Yi Qianqian glanced at it and shouted, "Hey, you dropped something." Chapter 1851. As he shouted, he strode forward and reached out to snatch it. Yi Qianqian's hand was knocked away, and she felt a burning pain. When she looked up, the man reached out and pushed her away at the same time. His hand quickly reached forward. Yi Qianqian clearly saw a cold glint flash past her eyes. Yi Qianqian screamed and fell backward. The cold light passed through the place where she had just been standing in mist. The man's face, which was only half exposed, was a little ferocious. He clutched the small white thing in his hand tightly and walked toward Yi Qianqian without a word. Yi Qianqian's face turned pale, and she screamed, "Ah, help!" She retreated backward in panic and clumsiness. "Who's there?" A loud shout came from outside. The man in black immediately turned around and saw the security guard behind him. He gritted his teeth and glared at Yi Qianqian. Then, he ran to the emergency exit and disappeared without a trace. When a security guard saw Yi Qianqian, he immediately ran up and asked, "Miss, are you okay?" Yi Qianqian felt relieved. Her heart was beating so fast that it felt like it was about to jump out. She looked up at the security guard's face and suddenly realized that her body was trembling. She collapsed to the ground. Yi Qianqian immediately opened her bag. With trembling hands, she took out her phone and dialed Shun Julia's number. Shun Julia's line was busy. "Hello, please don't hang up. The number you have dialed is busy." Before the mechanical female voice could finish speaking, the call was picked up. "Hello." It was Shun Julia's voice. Yi Qianqian's heart trembled violently. She pouted and tears fell down her face. She shouted, "Old Shun, I was almost killed." When Shun Julia picked up Yi Qianqian, she was sitting in the security booth with red eyes. When she saw Shun Julia coming over, Yi Qianqian stood up and threw herself at him. She sniffled and said, "Let's move." It was so scary. I thought I was going to die. Yi Qianqian's body was trembling, and Shun Julia's heart was also trembling. He hugged her and whispered, "Don't be afraid. I'm here. Don't go to work today. Let's go home first." "Okay." Yi Qianqian nodded. She felt like her whole body was about to melt. Yi Qianqian was still a little traumatized when she went upstairs. Shun Julia called Yi Qianqian to apply for a leave of absence and explained the situation to her. He then started packing his luggage and said, "Let's stay in a hotel for a few days. We'll move in when I find an apartment." Yi Qianqian hugged him and looked up at him. She said, "Why don't I ask my sister or Lily if there are any vacant houses available? Why don't we buy their second-hand houses?" "Sure, you decide. I still have to renovate, decorate, and wait for the new house. I don't think I can stay here anymore. Old Shun, do you think that person will come back for me?" "Don't think too much, it won't happen." But Grandma and Uncle Blind told me to be careful of villains. Could this drug addict be a villain? I feel so scared. "It's okay. Don't think too much." Shun Julia tapped her on the forehead. "Your brain is so active, and your imagination is so rich. How could you be willing to be a comics reviewer? You should draw a comic yourself." Chapter 1852. Shun Julia found it a little funny, but he also felt a little defeated. He wanted to laugh, but he couldn't. "Why can't I even change the subject? Be good. Don't be afraid. It'll be fine." Yi Qianqian still found it a little strange. She looked up and asked, "What if he comes back to look for me?" "He won't. He won't be able to find you. We'll stay outside for a few days. When we find a place to live, we'll come back and move." "Okay." Yi Qianqian still felt a little scared. After thinking about it, she went to look for the remote surveillance camera she had bought in the past. She had bought it for fun, but Yi Qianqian had never used it. It was two small cameras with powerful night vision capabilities. Although it wasn't particularly expensive and the quality wasn't very high, it was enough to ensure her safety. Yi Qianqian plugged in the two devices and placed one of them on the shoe cabinet in the entryway. The shoe cabinet was very high, and there were ornaments on it. She placed the small camera behind the ornaments, and the angle of view just happened to cover the entire living room. "Surveillance camera?" Shun Julia looked at the gadgets that Yi Qianqian was fiddling with. He chuckled and asked, "Is this kind of surveillance useful?" "It doesn't matter if it's useful or not. Anyway, it's just sitting there. I'll just use it. I don't feel very comfortable." Yi Qianqian looked at Shun Julia with a little grievance. What had just happened had really scared her. Yi Qianqian had lived for 26 years, and she had never encountered such a thing. In the past, she had always felt that such things were very far away from her. But when she really encountered it, Yi Qianqian suddenly realized that in fact, death was actually around her. If he was unlucky, he might be ambushed while walking on the street or going down the stairs and lose his life. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that the world was extremely scary. Yi Qianqian installed another small camera in the room. After looking for a long time for an angle, she finally decided to place it at the top of the wardrobe. She connected it to the internet. The phone screen already displayed all the movements in the entire room. Shun Julia watched her toss and turn and let her do as she pleased. He was glad that she was fine. Yi Qianqian packed a few changes of clothes and took the computer with her. After confirming that all the valuables were there, Yi Qianqian walked out. After packing up, Yi Qianqian gave Yi Yuyu a call. Yi Yuyu answered the call very quickly. When she saw that it was Yi Qianqian, she was pleasantly surprised. "Sis? Yuyu, where are you?" "I'm at home. Do you want to come over? It just so happens that I made some small cakes. Come over and have a taste." After she said that, she suddenly remembered that it was Monday. "Are you going to work today?" I asked for leave. Sob sob. "Yuyu, I was scared to death just now." Yi Qianqian began to complain, but she quickly shut her mouth and said, "I'll go to your place. Wait for me." "Yeah, come on." Yi Yu looked at the time. It was past 9 a.m. Shun Julia's car had been in the garage for a long time. It hadn't been driven for more than half a month, so it was covered in a layer of dust. She said, "I thought you drove it away. What a waste of you. Let's take it to the car wash." "Okay, get in the car first." Shun Julia opened the door for her. The moment Yi Qianqian got into the car, Shun Julia felt as if someone was staring at him. The feeling was fleeting, but after looking around, he didn't notice anything amiss. Chapter 1853. Shun Julia narrowed his eyes and secretly raised his guard. He had always been sensitive, so this feeling shouldn't have come from nowhere. "What's wrong?" Yi Qianqian noticed that Shun Julia hadn't moved for a long time. She reached out and tugged at his hand. Shun Julia shook his head gently. "I'm fine. Sit tight." Yi Qianqian fastened her seatbelt, took the car door, and sat down. Shun Julia looked left and right again before finally getting into the car. He fastened his seatbelt and started the engine. When Yi Qianqian saw him looking around warily, she felt a little creeped out. Shun Julia was never like that. His behavior today was very unusual. "Old Shun, what did you see?" Yi Qianqian asked. She suddenly felt a shiver run down her spine. He turned his head abruptly. Behind him was a beautiful luxury car with a pitch-black interior. There didn't seem to be anything strange. On the other hand, Shun Julia was shocked by Yi Qianqian's reaction. "What's wrong?" Shun Julia's expression was one of shock. Yi Qianqian's heart was about to jump out of her chest. "I feel like I'm going crazy. What should I do? I've been so paranoid." "Don't be afraid. Relax," Shun Julia said as he drove the car out of the underground parking lot. His voice was soft and steady, as if it contained an unknown magic that hypnotized and soothed her. Shun Julia didn't focus all his attention on that. Instead, he kept an eye on his surroundings and the rearview mirror. Shun Julia exited the bustling district and got on the highway. When Yi Qianqian heard him speak, she suddenly felt that something was amiss. She said, "You're opening it the wrong way around." "Yes, I know." Shun Julia kept glancing at the rearview mirror as he drove. Let the car get used to the feeling of being on the road. It's not a bad idea to take a detour. This was the first time Yi Qianqian had heard of such a thing. She looked at Shun Julia and realized that he was a little distracted. "What are you doing?" "Just sit quietly." Shun Julia drove steadily. When he suddenly sped up, Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat. She sat there without a word. However, When he looked at the rearview mirrors on the left and right, as well as the mirror in the middle, there didn't seem to be anything strange. However, Shunjilia's reaction made everyone nervous. Yi Qianqian asked hesitantly, "Is someone following us?" Shunjilia didn't reply. He just increased the speed of the car. Yi Qianqian looked back. It was not until all the cars behind them had disappeared that Shunjilia slowed down. Was someone following us just now? Yi Qianqian was already sweating profusely. She looked at Shunjilia with fear and worry in her eyes. Shunjilia shook his head. "No, it was just a false alarm." "Is that so? Well, I just wanted to give it a try, just in case." If it's really the person from this morning, then if he follows us to Yu Yu's house, Yu Yu and Third Brotherly will probably be in danger. But fortunately, I was overthinking it. Why are you being so paranoid all of a sudden? Yi Qianqian had a nagging feeling that things weren't that simple. Shunjilia wasn't like her. Shunjilia must have seen or sensed something that made him so wary. "What do you mean by fine? I was obviously infected by you." Shunjilia chuckled. He held onto the steering wheel and said helplessly, "Turn on the GPS. I'm lost." Chapter 1854. By the time they reached Yi Yu's house, it had already been 2 hours since they had left. Looking at the time, it was almost 12 o'clock. This was one of the famous villas in Kingstown. The people who lived here were either rich or powerful. All the cars coming and going were luxury cars. Shunjilia's flashy Porsche looked very mediocre in comparison. Shunjilia and Yi Qianqian searched through their memories, but they couldn't find Li Jinnan's house. In the end, they gave Yi Yu a call. Yi Yu was in the middle of cooking. When she received Yi Qianqian's call, she laughed out loud. "Where are you right now?" "Ah, we're at number 3. I live in room 8. It has a black iron gate, and there's a pot of red roses at the door. Go south, and you'll see it when you head east." Yi Qianqian was silent for a moment before she yelled, "Can you tell me which direction is up, down, left, and right?" Who could understand north, south, east, and west? Yi Yu laughed out loud. "Isn't Shunjilia coming with you? Get him to take you. I'm cooking now. I'm hanging up." When Yi Qianqian heard the busy tone, she gritted her teeth. Shunjilia glanced at her and asked, "Where?" "South and east." Shunjilia immediately stepped on the accelerator and made a U-turn. Yi Qianqian widened her eyes and asked, "You know where it is? Not everyone is like you who can't tell the difference between north, south, east, and west." Shunjilia was a little smug. "You haven't been a living map for so many years for nothing." "Bah, I have a GPS when I go out. I just don't know the house number." She put her hands on her hips and puffed out her chest as she said, "If you have the guts, dial the house number and use the navigation now. I guarantee that we'll be there in no time." All right. I got it." Shunjilia couldn't help but laugh. "There are biscuits in the back of the car. Take them out and give them to Yu Yu." "Ah, when did you buy the cookies?" Shunjilia was a little embarrassed. He rubbed his nose and said, "It's been a long time. My colleague gave me this last time. I can't go to Yu Yu's house empty-handed, so I took it as a gift." "Aya, she's my sister. Why are you being so polite?" Although he said that, he still turned around and took out the biscuit. It was quite an expensive brand, and the packaging looked quite high-end. "But how long have you put it there? Can it still be eaten?" "Sure. This kind of thing has a shelf life of at least half a year, right? It's edible." In fact, Shunjilia wasn't sure either. In the end, he flipped through the expiration date. After confirming that there were no problems with it, he finally felt at ease. "We're here." Yi Qianqian saw a particularly luxuriant cluster of red roses. They climbed up the railing and sprouted a bud. Behind the black iron railings was a beautifully landscaped courtyard. One could tell at a glance that it was huge. It wasn't Yi Qianqian's first time here, but she was still amazed by the sight. With envy in her eyes, Yi Qianqian unbuckled her seatbelt and got out of the car with the biscuits. The expression on Yi Qianqian's face wasn't obvious, but Shunjilia saw it clearly. Without making a sound, he parked the car before getting out and pressing the doorbell. The door opened automatically. Yi Qianqian and Shun Julia walked in and saw the luxurious yet minimalistic interior decoration. Yi Yu had just finished preparing the last dish. When she saw them enter, she said, "You're here. We're just about to eat. Sis, can you give me a hand?" Chapter 1855. Oomph. It's been so long since you've come to see me. How dare you say that? Yi Yu's belly was propped up. She looked great. Her skin was rosy and smooth. Yi Qianqian had seen a few pregnant women before, but none of them looked like Yi Yu. One look was enough to tell that she was living a good life. Yi Yu's steps were light as she carried the dishes out. If it weren't for her belly, it would be hard to tell that she was pregnant. "Fisk, is your man back for dinner?" "Of course he is," Yi Yu replied briskly. She looked at the clock hanging in the middle of the living room and said, "It's almost time." She turned to the kitchen and took out the dishes that she had just prepared. Yi Qianqian washed her hands and helped to get the bowls and chopsticks. She had just scooped the rice when Yi Yu suddenly said, "3, 2, 1. Ding dong." The doorbell rang just in time. Yi Yu immediately rushed to the door. Yi Qianqian was shocked when she saw that and said, "No way. How did she hear him coming back from so far away?" Or was Yi Yu just used to Li Jinnan's return at this time? The door opened. Yi Yu was like a lively bird as she flew into Li Jinnan's arms. Li Jinnan caught her in his arms. His eyes were filled with tenderness. "You're back." "Yeah," Li Jinnan replied without much emotion. He then noticed that there were guests inside. Yi Yu pulled Li Jinnan along and said, "My sister is here, and so is Shun Julia." She lowered her voice and whispered, "He might even be my brother-in-law in the future." When Shun Julia saw Yi Yu's expression, the smile on his face was pure and unpretentious. He looked truly happy. Yi Yu had stayed with the Shun family for a period of time. Shun Julia had seen her almost every day. At that time, Yi Yu had only been deliberately trying to please him. The only other thing she had shown was her obvious depression. Thank goodness. Thank goodness that she had divorced Shen Luoan. Otherwise, Yi Yu would never have been happy in this life. Li Jinan laughed as he was pulled up by Yi Yu. His eyes were fixed on Yi Yu's feet. He didn't forget to remind her, "Be careful. The floor is slippery." "I won't. I'll walk around every day. It's fine." She tugged at Li Jinan and said to Shun Julia and Yi Qianqian, "We'll go wash our hands first. Sit down. It's time to eat." Yi Qianqian had never been one to be pretentious. She immediately sat down and poured herself and Shun Julia a bowl of rice. "You're living such a good life. Every day, you come up with new ways to cook for your husband. You wait for your husband to go to work while you wait at home to give birth," Yi Qianqian said with a hint of envy in her voice. Of course, Shun Julia could tell. He raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "You can do the same in the future. Of course, I want to be like this in the future, but we'll talk about it when I have children. If I don't have children and don't work, then I'll be too lazy." Yi Qianqian looked at Shun Julia with yearning in her eyes. "Can you afford to support me in the future?" "That goes without saying." Shun Julia extended his hand and tapped Yi Qianqian's forehead. He said, "Even if you asked me to raise 8 or 10 more children, I'd be able to afford it." "Bah, 8 or 10 children. Who do you want to have them with?" "With you, of course. Who else can I have them with?" Chapter 1856. Nonsense. Uncle Blind Man also said that it's just a possibility. It might not happen. Why are you so concerned about it? The smile on Yi Qianqian's face disappeared completely. She sighed softly. Yi Yu and Li Jinan walked over quickly. When she saw Yi Qianqian's unhappy expression, Yi Yu walked over curiously and asked, "What's wrong?" "Sob. Yu, what do you think I'll do if I can't have children in the future?" Yi Qianqian looked at Yi Yu with hurt written all over her face. Yi Yu laughed and sat down on the chair that Li Jinan had brought out for her. She replied, "How is that possible? Why can't you have children out of nowhere?" As she spoke, Yi Yu's face was full of ambiguity. She looked at Yi Qianqian and then at Shun Julia and asked, "Are the two of you preparing to have children?" Didn't they just get back together not too long ago? Yu was a little surprised. She hadn't expected that after getting back together, not only would they be talking about marriage, but they would also be preparing to get pregnant. Yi Qianqian pouted her lips. She felt defeated and replied, "That's not it. I've just encountered a few things that haven't been going my way lately." He told Yu in detail about her visit to Shun Jilia's parents in the capital, as well as what Shun Jilia's grandmother and the blind uncle had said. Yi Qianqian's bitter expression, coupled with the aggrieved expression on her face, made her look extremely pitiful. "Yu, I'm so envious of you now. You have such a happy family, and your belly is so big. What if I really can't have children in the future, just like they said?" "That won't happen. That old lady is a fraud." Yu was a little annoyed. "She's spouting nonsense. She even said that I'd get into big trouble when I turn 25. I'm 26 now. What big trouble can I get into?" Yi Qianqian's eyes widened when she heard that. "That can't be. What did she say that?" 2 years ago, Shun Jilie replied. "But you're really in big trouble now. Have you forgotten?" Yi Qianqian covered her mouth in disbelief. "That Guan guy and Shen Luo and are in jail. Have you forgotten?" "That's right. Of course not. That was when I was 26 years old. She said I was 25 years old. You hung a steel wire and fell from it." She couldn't help but link the incident with Yi Yu. "Didn't you stay in the hospital for many days at that time? Wasn't that a big deal?" Yi Qianqian was a little paranoid. Yi Yu was at a loss for words. All right. If that's the case, aren't I perfectly fine right now? That's different." Yi Qianqian panicked. "They're saying that I won't be able to have children in the future. It's over. It's over. What should I do?" "That won't happen. You've been the only one thinking about it." Shun Jilie held her hand. He felt helpless and defeated. "They're just saying it's a possibility. Trust me. I'll tell you about it when we get home tonight. You'll know. I should give her a simple treatment tonight. Otherwise, Yi Qianqian's mental health will deteriorate sooner or later." Shun Jilie was filled with regret. "If I'd known, I wouldn't have been in such a hurry and brought you home." In the end, Yi Qianqian knew that she might have gone overboard. She quickly pressed his hand down and said, All right. I'll stop talking. Let's eat." Chapter 1857. When Yi Qianqian heard Shun Jilie's words, she didn't say a word. She only looked up at Yi Yu. Yi Yu shrugged and said, "I think you're overthinking it. You're too scared to think that it might be true. If you think about it from a different perspective, things will be much better." "Think about it from a different perspective?" "That's right." Yi Yu looked at Yi Qianqian and took a sip of the soup. "Perhaps it's just an excuse that the old madam of the Shun family wants to object to you being together with Jilie. Perhaps it's just a lie that she came up with to make you back off. But the blind uncle in our town said it too." "Who's the blind uncle?" "He's a blind man in Yun Town who's possessed by a deity. He's more than 10 years older than Dad, but he looks older. You've probably met him before." "I see." Yi Yu nodded her head. She was silent for a moment before saying, "Perhaps the old lady knew that you were going to look for the blind uncle and colluded with him? How is that possible?" Yi Qianqian found it absurd. "Why is it impossible? Didn't you say that the blind uncle was possessed by a deity?" "The old lady claimed to be half a deity. Perhaps they have a mysterious channel in a world that we can't see that allows them to communicate with each other. Then, they colluded with each other to deceive you." Yi Yu's words sent a shiver down everyone's spine. Li Jinan felt a little uncomfortable. He cleared his throat and picked up a piece of food for her. "Eat your food. Don't be superstitious." "That's right." Shun Jilie also picked up a piece of cake for Yi Qianqian. With a serious expression, he said, "This is the era of science. Don't believe in such nonsense. Even if it's true, it doesn't matter. Medical science is so advanced now." Yi Yu nodded her head vehemently. When Li Jinan saw that, he chimed in and said, "At most, we can have a test tube baby. The child will still be our own." When Yi Qianqian heard that, her lips twitched. Yi Yu nudged Li Jinan and glared at him. She then looked at Yi Qianqian and said, "Don't listen to my husband. Don't let your imagination run wild. If God is useful, what's the point of science?" "Yeah, Yi Yu is right. Let's eat. Let's not talk about this anymore." Shun Jilie picked up the bowl and stuffed it into Yi Qianqian's hand. Only then did Yi Qianqian stop talking and bury her head in her food. Yi Yu sipped her soup and looked at Li Jinan. She asked, I heard that our company is preparing to adapt a novel into a television series. What's it called? 99 Days of Hidden Marriage, Li Jinan said. It's about a female gangster who was framed and had her tongue cut off. She became mute. Later, she married her Prince Charming. 3 years later, she got pregnant and was kidnapped. She died. Then, she was reborn. Uffed. It can't be. Isn't her husband going to save her? No, I'm going on a date with the white moonlight in my heart. No way. Isn't she pregnant with his child? Apparently, the child isn't his. It's his younger brother's, so... D*MN. That man is such a jerk. Yi Qianqian's face was filled with anger. When is the television series airing? I'm going to go and scold him. Li Jinan smiled. It hasn't started filming yet. Just wait. If such a man existed in real life, his corpse would probably be whipped, Shun Julia interjected. Wan Lily, ha ha ha. Chapter 1858. Yi Qianqian and Yi Yu both looked over. Shin Julia felt a little creeped out by their stares. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? Shin Julia felt a little uncomfortable. It's not just being whipped. You should be cut into pieces and minced into minced meat. Yi Qianqian gritted her teeth. You mustn't be that kind of man in the future. You won't have a good ending if you abandon someone after you've used them. Shun Julia could even sense Yi Qianqian's murderous aura. He nodded his head repeatedly and said, Got it, got it. Yi Yu laughed and asked, Why did you suddenly come looking for me today? Isn't it Monday today? Don't you have to work? Usually, at this time, Yi Qianqian would be busy with work. Where would she find the time to hang out with him? At the mention of that, Yi Qianqian felt even more aggrieved. She looked like she was about to burst into tears as she said, Why have I been so unlucky lately? Things like this always happen. Boo-hoo, let me tell you. He recounted everything that had happened this morning in detail. She said that can't be. That's too dangerous. I think it's best that you don't go back for the next few days. Why don't you come stay with me for a few days? We still have a few empty rooms here. Feel free to stay. Yi Yu's heart skipped a beat. Yi Qianqian shook her head pitifully and replied, We're planning to stay in a hotel. Why are you staying in a hotel? Just stay at my place. Ainin, is that okay? Yi Yu looked at Li Jinan. Li Jinan nodded his head. I'm fine with that. Sister-in-law can accompany my wife at the same time. With 2 women around, it won't be too boring. Shun Julia didn't think it was appropriate and said, Forget it. We have to work during the day. It's not good for a pregnant woman to have a good rest. Qianqian, let's just stay in a hotel. Well, let's stay in a hotel. But Yu, brother-in-law, I want to ask, do you have any unused houses in your hands? The kind of second-hand houses that you want to sell to us? Li Jinan's house was definitely very safe. Moreover, since it was a second-hand house owned by one of their own, the facilities inside must be trustworthy, saving them trouble. Yi Qianqian looked at him expectantly, her eyes sparkling. Yi Yu thought for a moment and looked at Li Jinan. She asked, Didn't you mention that your brother's house in Jiangzhou was going to be sold? Yi Qianqian almost spat out her saliva. Jiangzhou? Jiangzhou was a famous luxury villa district in Kingstown. Yi Qianqian would never be able to afford a house like that. I say, Yu, you think too highly of me. The villas in Jiangzhou are not something that ordinary people like us can afford. When Shun Julia heard that, he looked up and asked, Is it expensive? What do you mean by expensive? That was quite expensive. It should be at least in tens of millions, right? Yi Qianqian drank a glass of fruit juice to calm her nerves. Li Jinan rubbed his nose and replied, My brother does want to sell it, but the villa was renovated badly. It's not suitable for you to stay in. I do have a smaller commercial apartment here. It's about 130 square feet. It's in Dragon City. Dragon City? That place was also a high-end residence, but the price should be acceptable. Chapter 1859. Shunjilia didn't answer Yi Qianqian. Instead, he looked at Li Jinan and asked, "Can you make a move?" Li Jinan nodded slightly. "Sure. I took it from my second brother. I don't have a title deed with me. If you want it, I'll get it from my brother." "That works?" Yi Qianqian was speechless. "Have you lived there before?" "I lived there for a while, but I moved to the company, so I don't live there anymore." "I see." Yi Qianqian nodded her head and looked at Shunjilia. "Shall we go take a look later?" "Sure." After dinner, Yi Qianqian helped Yi Yu clean up and wash the dishes. The two men, Shunjilia and Li Jinan, sat opposite each other on the sofa and chatted happily. After cleaning up, Yi Qianqian and Yi Yu walked in the direction of the sofa in the living room. At a glance, they saw the smiles on the faces of the two men. "Are you done?" Shunjilia looked at Yi Qianqian, stood up, and said, "Let's go." Brother-in-law said he'd take us to have a look. "Ah, so fast. Well, you guys are moving anyway. The apartment hasn't been empty for long, so it should be very clean inside. I don't have anything to do in the afternoon. Let's go together." Li Jinan picked up the car key. "Honey, do you want to go together? Since you're all going, I'll go with you." She hadn't gone out in a long time, so she was a little excited. "I'm going to change." The corners of Li Jinan's mouth turned up. He turned to look at Yi Qianqian and Shunjilia and said, "I'll go help her. You guys take a seat first." "All right, go ahead." When Li Jinan's silhouette disappeared down the stairs, Yi Qianqian nudged Shunjilia and asked, "What were you talking about just now?" "No, we were just chatting casually." "What did you talk about?" "I've always felt that my brother-in-law is quite aloof. How can you chat with him so happily?" "What the hell?" Puffed. Shunjilia couldn't help but laugh. "Of course you're cold to girls, but we men are different. We have common topics to talk about." "What? A car? Beautiful women?" Yi Qianqian glanced at him in disdain. "That's all men get when they get together." "Yeah, beautiful, we're talking about wives. He's talking about his wife, I'm talking about mine." "Bah, who's your wife?" Yi Qianqian stood up. "We're not married yet." Shunjilia held her in his arms. "It's only a matter of time." Yi Qianqian smiled and looked at him. The atmosphere was harmonious and peaceful. Upstairs, Yi Yu had found some clothes. When she saw Li Jinan come up, she took one look and asked, "Nan, do I look good in this?" "Nice. You haven't seen it yet." Yi Yu pouted. Li Jinan walked up and looked at the dress. He gestured and said, "You look good in anything. Since we're going out, let's go to second uncle's house on the way. I really miss those children." "Sure." Li Jinan agreed without hesitation. He started to help Yi Yu change into her clothes. When they came down, Yi Qianqian and Shunjilia were sitting on the sofa, looking at their phones. When they saw them coming down, they stood up together. Shunjilia replied, "I told you not to be so paranoid. Isn't everything fine now?" When Yi Yu heard that, she asked curiously, "What are you doing? Didn't I almost get into an accident this morning?" "I installed a surveillance camera at home. I just turned it on to take a look." Yi Yu felt her hair stand on end. "Are you afraid that that person will find his way to your house? It's better to be safe than sorry. Don't scare yourself. He's not that resourceful." Shunjilia had no choice but to tap her forehead. "Let's go." Dash. Chapter 1860. Li Jinan drove his own car, so he naturally followed Yi Yu. The four of them and the two cars followed Li Jinan around. After a round of discussion, they decided on a destination. Yi Yu wanted to go to Li Siqing's house to see the children, so Yi Qianqian and Shunjilia suggested that they go to the hotel to rest. They parted ways. Yi Yu hadn't visited the children in a long time. After buying some toys for them, she went to Yushio. At that time, the children had returned from school. They sat in the living room chatting and doing their homework. Li Mosen was like a little adult. He watched Li Jianyue do her homework, occasionally giving her pointers and frowning. When Yi Yu arrived, Li Jianyue was pleasantly surprised. She put down her pencil and called out, "Auntie." Her small body was obviously much thinner than before. In the past, she had been a chubby little girl. Now, she had less meat on her body, but she had grown taller. Li Jinan felt a sense of danger. He stood in front of his wife and used one hand to block Li Jianyue. He said, "Be careful. Your little cousin is in your auntie's stomach. Ah, I know. Li Jinyue's face was round, and her skin was pink and tender. Her eyes were like black agate, crystal clear and bright. She looked at Yi Yu's belly and said, "There's a little sister in my mother's belly too." Li Jinan raised his eyebrows slightly and chuckled. He picked Li Jinyue up and asked, "How do you know it's a little sister?" "My daddy said it." Daddy said that the thing in mommy's stomach must be a little sister. Li Jinyue tilted her head and kept looking at Yi Yu's stomach. "I think Annie is also having a little sister in her stomach." "What?" Yi Yu adored the little girl. She was pretty, lively, and quick-witted. Granny Rong said that a round stomach will give birth to a little sister, and a pointy stomach will give birth to a little brother, but I've never seen a pointy stomach before. So, Annie must be having a little sister in your stomach too. Yi Yu couldn't help but laugh. She walked over and touched Li Jinyue's little face. She said, "You're so mischievous. Come down. I bought you a toy." Li Jinyue was a little surprised, but before she could get excited, she turned her head to take a look. She looked left and right. When she realized that no one was coming out, she wiggled her body excitedly and got down from Li Jinan's body. When Li Jinan saw that, he knew what the little guy was up to. He reached out and knocked on her little head. "You haven't finished your homework, have you?" Li Jinyue covered her head and pouted. She looked a little unhappy and said, "Who said that? I'm done. It's just that there are a lot of mistakes." Li Mosin walked over with a small notebook and said, "Uncle, take a look at Ursu's homework." Li Jinan rarely had time to visit the little guys, but he knew that Li Mosin had skipped a grade and was in the 3rd grade, and his academic performance was particularly good. As for Li Jinyue, she could only stay in the 1st year. When he took Li Jinyue's notebook, he didn't have much hope in his heart. However, when he opened the first page of the notebook, he was still shocked by Li Jinyue's ugly handwriting. The corner of his mouth twitched as he asked, "What kind of homework is this?" "A dictation," Li Jinyue said loudly. "I feel that my handwriting is all correct. I even looked it up in the dictionary." Chapter 1861. Li Jinan laughed out loud and read it aloud. "Who taught you that?" When Li Jinyue heard that, she was not convinced. She put her hands on her hips and puffed out her chest. "Isn't that so, Auntie? I wrote Wolf gets raped. Is that wrong?" Yi Yu was arranging the toys for the little girl. When she heard that, she didn't even look up and replied, "There's nothing wrong with being in cahoots. Isn't that an idiom?" "That's right." Li Jinyue walked over angrily and said, "Little uncle is a bad guy. Brother Mosin is laughing at me. You're laughing at me too." Li Jinan couldn't help but laugh. He looked over and said, "You're taking your own breasts." "Ha ha ha." Li Jinan couldn't hold it in any longer. "Taking your own breasts? Isn't that a little too difficult?" "What?" Yi Yu looked over. "What's wrong with that? You didn't write it wrong." Li Jinan squatted down and took the notebook over to read it with his wife. When Yi Yu saw it, she laughed out loud. Li Jinyue's face turned red. She went forward and snatched the notebook from Li Jinan's hand. She turned around and sat down on the sofa angrily. "What's going on?" Su Qianxi's gentle voice was heard. Following that was the sound of slow footsteps. When Li Jinyue saw Su Qianxi, she pouted and shouted, "Mom, they're all laughing at me." Su Qianxi walked down the stairs with a man following behind her. When Li Xiqing saw Li Jinan, he raised his eyebrows slightly and asked, "What's the wind today?" Li Jinan stood up and helped Yi Yu up. He said, "I have nothing to do today, so I brought my wife here to play." He looked at Su Qianxi's belly and exclaimed, "Sister-in-law's belly is growing too big. It's not. Any slower and I'll die." Li Xiqing glanced at Su Qianxi's belly and sighed. Su Qianxi blushed. She elbowed Li Xiqing and said softly, "What are you talking about?" Li Xiqing blocked her hand and said sternly, "What are you thinking? I'm saying that taking care of you and the kids will distract me." Su Qianxi blushed even more, gave him a stare, and then went to sit with her daughter on the sofa. Li Jinan was experienced, so he smiled ambiguously and didn't point it out. Yi Yi was still playing with Li Jinyue's toys. She said, "Ursu, little aunt bought you a fantasy series of Lego. Do you want to play with me? She looked at her notebook and said, I haven't finished my homework yet. With that, she looked at Li Siqing pitifully and said, Daddy. With a smile on his lips, Li Siqing reached out. Li Jianyue subconsciously put the book in his palm, but before she put it down, she immediately retracted her hand. She pouted and warned, Daddy, don't laugh at me. Li Siqing didn't agree, but he didn't disagree either. He picked up the booklet and said, Go ahead and play with Auntie. Li Jianyue jumped excitedly. She turned around and skipped over to Yi Yuyu's side. She shouted, Little Auntie, I'm here. Seeing his daughter's expression, Li Siqing smiled slightly and flipped open the exercise book. His smile immediately froze. After a moment of silence, he said, Inviting the wolf into the house. The wolf is besieged and raped. There's no turning back. Li Jinan and Yi Yuyu burst out laughing at the same time. They couldn't help but laugh out loud. Poison is a guest in the village. Every festive season is missed. Chapter 1862. Li Jianyue pouted and shouted, These are all third-grade questions. I've never learned them before. She knows all the first-grade questions, Li Mosin said. Dad, I think Ursu is a fast learner. That's right. I'm very smart. Li Jianyue didn't know how wrong she was. She echoed, Although, I might have written a few words wrongly. If an old book taught me, I would definitely write them. Mom, don't you think so? Li Jianyue was completely unaware of how wrong she was. Su Qianxi laughed until her shoulders trembled. When she heard that, she couldn't help but burst out laughing. Li Jianyue's mouth turned into a hook. Her little face and eyes were red. She said, Bad guy, you're all laughing at me. Sob, sob, sob. Su Qianxi quickly stopped smiling and said, Ursu, these are all third-grade knowledge, right? Yeah. Li Jianyue nodded. After sniffing, she swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Very good. A first grader can write so much. There are not so many children outside who can write so well. Su Qianxi hugged her daughter and said, Our little princess is the smartest. Su Qianxi went over and hugged her daughter. Li Jianyue blinked and asked pitifully, Really? Of course. Do you know how to put together the Lego that Annie gave you? Su Qianxi hugged Li Jianyue and slowly walked in the direction of Yi Yuyu. Suddenly, her belly was kicked. Su Qianxi was stunned. Her lips curled into a smile as she stroked her belly. Li Siqing saw it and walked over. He asked softly, Did this little guy kick you again? Su Qianxi nodded. I suddenly kicked her, but she stopped now. She turned her head and looked at Li Siqing. Then, she pulled him and said, Accompany your daughter to put together the Lego. Li Siqing had no choice but to walk over to the pile of Lego. He looked at it and said, Ursu, come here. Li Ursu walked over and looked at her father obediently. Do you know how to put it together? Yes. Do you know how to read the blueprints? Yes. Do you want Dad to teach you? No need. Okay, then work hard on your own. Li Siqing rubbed Li Jianyue's little head. Li Jianan was dumbfounded. Is that even possible? Isn't this a little too convenient? In this way, Li Siqing could spend more time with his wife and work. No wonder his company was getting better and better recently. No wonder it said that daughters are the closest to their parents. It made him want to have a daughter too. He couldn't help but glance at Yi Yuyu's tummy and ask, Are we having a son or a daughter? Yi Yuyu looked at him and said heartlessly, Son. Li Jinan was a little disappointed and replied, A son is fine too. A daughter would be best. Li Siqing heard their words and felt even more proud. Looking at his daughter, he said lovingly, Dad will ask Granny Rong to give you a nutritious meal. Su Qianxi suddenly remembered and said, I'll call Nanny Rong and tell her to cook more tonight. I want to eat Nanny Rong's sweet and sour fish. Li Jinan didn't stand on ceremony at all. Add more vinegar. My wife loves it. Su Qianxi laughed and said, All right, all right, all right. Li Jinan sat on the sofa, glanced at the family portrait hanging in the living room, and asked, Daesu, are you used to living in the capital? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.